Well, welcome to our Purim broadcast, 8 till midnight tonight only. And Michael, this is a preview really for what's happening, another special thing, this coming Friday, March 13, our first ever double feature of Shabbat Night Live.
That's the only way we could get all of the teaching on the doctrine of baptisms in before our Passover celebration. And this is absolutely critical information every believer needs to know and understand. So enjoy the time that we have together for Purim. And now, on Friday night, join us for our double feature.
That's right. Starts normal time, 8 p.m. Eastern, and it'll go all until we're done. 2 episodes back to back. Join us then.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you will please take your Bibles and turn to the book of Hadassah. It is anglicized, her pagan name, Esther or Easter. And so we're going to now go into the very story that we bring about each time, this time of year, each year. And it was a little over 2,500 years ago. According to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which never changes, it can never be nullified, that it was Mordecai and Hadassah who said that all the Jews will keep this feast every year forever. Now, this isn't for all of Israel. Israel had been scattered, had been in captivity, but the Jews who were in slavery or taken away into captivity in Babylon, it is there that the story, that the events recorded in the book of Esther transpired, and it is to remember this every single year. Because, ladies and gentlemen, this has very prophetic significance for the last days as well. For the next 4 weeks, we are going to dig into Purim, the making of the king's bride, and tonight it is the vanquishing of Vashti. So we're going to start out with the book of Hadassah, as I like to call her by her Hebrew name, and we're going to find out how this young Jewish girl ended up with the name that represents the Babylonian goddess of fertility, Easter, or Esther. And so now we begin reading in chapter 1, verse 1. Now it came to pass in the days of Achashverosh, this is the Achashverosh which reigned from India even unto Ethiopia. This most likely is Xerxes. Because of the detail that we have here, this is Xerxes. Now remember, it is Xerxes that takes the 1,000,000-man army and then attacks Greece and is unable to bust through the 300 Spartans who are able to hold back the 1,000,000-man army until the Grecians are able to repel the army of Xerxes. But Xerxes, it says he reigns from India to the Indus River in India all the way to Ethiopia, over 127 provinces, 127 provinces. Now, we need to understand this, that this goes all through what is now modern-day Turkey, all the way down into the continent of Africa, all the way to the Indus River in India. These are 127 kingdoms. These are nations. These are not like little provinces or little states like in the United States. No, this is a vast, vast empire. And his 1,000,000-man army was said to have drank rivers dry. They would completely destroy all the vegetation as they went through an area just to feed this incredible army. But now it is a time of peace. And now he reigns over this entire area, 127 countries. And in those days, in verse 2, when King Ahasuerus sat on the throne of his kingdom, which was in Shushan, which is Babylon, the palace, in the 3rd year of his reign, he made a feast for all of his princes and all of his servants. The power of Persia and Media, all of the authority, the power, the kingship, all of the rulers, the nobles and the princes of the province being before him. And it says that when he showed the riches of his glorious kingdom and the honor of his excellent majesty many days, even 180 days, 180 days, he throws a party which involves all of the nobility, all of the grand viziers, all of the rulers and the under-rulers are brought together for a world's fair. 180 days, 6 months, this is when he is showing all the grandeur, all the majesty, all the glory of the greatest empire that reigns over the then known world. And this is what it looked like. And when these days were expired, these 180 days, these 6 months, world fair in which he's showing all the technology, all the majesty, all the glory. And remember, he has conquered all these different cultures. And the wealth of these cultures, the intellectual property of these cultures, the artisans, the artwork, everything that is in his domain are being exhibited, and this is such a grand and glorious occasion. Look how this thing transpires. When these 180 days, 6 months were expired, the king made a feast unto all the people that were present in Shushan the palace, both unto great and small. From the highest and those who lived in Babylon and Shushan in that area, at that point, everyone who was there participated in this. And it was a feast for 7 days in the court of the garden of the king's palace. Now, we're going to see the court of the garden of the king's palace. He spares absolutely no expense on this. In verse 6, it says, where were white and green and blue hangings, fastened with cords of fine linen, and purple to silver rings and pillars of marble. So, you know, if you can imagine this grand garden of the king, where he has marble pillars that are made for this occasion, beautiful polished marble pillars, and on these marble pillars are beautiful silver rings. And through these silver rings are these linen cords. Now they have to be linen, which is much stronger than silk, because over the whole area, this is a party that goes on day and night for 7 days. And so they have to have shade, and so these beautiful, billowing white and green and blue silk fabrics floating in the wind, attached by these linen cords on these silver rings on marble. It is the most glorious environment for the culmination of everything that the king, the emperor, has to display in his kingdom. And it says the beds were of gold and silver. And now, what does this mean? The beds were gold and silver. Now, how do you get comfortable on a bed of gold and silver? Well, this particular servant's cap that I'm wearing, this is a fabric that came out of Damascus. In fact, it is Reuben Prager who was building some of the accoutrements in the restoration of some of the traditions and cultures of the Second Temple period. He built the Aperion, or the royal wedding litter. And in order to build this, he had to have a fabric, and he went to a merchant who is a mutual friend of ours, who went all the way to Damascus to secure this. Now he had, when he finished the royal Aperion, the royal wedding litter, he had just enough to make one servant's cover. He made it for himself, but it was too small. When I went in there, and Reuben was outfitting me for our television program in my begedivri, he put it on me and it fit perfectly. Ladies and gentlemen, this much of this fabric 1 meter long, this wide, 60 centimeters, $600. Why? Because this is gold and silk. This is what this is made of. It's a fabric that is literally made of spun gold and silk. Now, I also have a little bit of the silver, the silver and the silk. And this is what these beds were made out of. Now, remember, it's day and night, 24 hours around the clock, and people do not sit in chairs in ancient Babylon. No, they are reclining on these beds. They are there for all the meals. They spend the night there, and each one of these beds were made of gold and silk and silver and silk. Each one of these beds would have been the equivalent in our day and time of $10,000. $10,000 he is spending on these couches for the people to sleep on and to recline on, to eat around the tables in this grand garden. And then it goes on to say, and he gave them, and upon the pavement of red and blue and white and black marble. And so now you've got all the artisans, the great artisans from the empire, who are putting a marble down with all these different colors and all these intricate patterns. This is like the one of the wonders of the world that we have never been able to see, because it was long ago destroyed.
One of the most famous stories in the Bible is that of the Apostle Paul being shipwrecked. Though it seemed all was lost, the Almighty stepped in and saved every person on board. In his new teaching, Shipwrecked, Michael Rood reveals this event as a metaphor for our journey in life and for our responsibility as believers to rescue those drowning in hopelessness.
Is a picture of the journey in life. We are on a ship. You are on a ship. You are on the ship. And there are so many people around who are drowning.
Shipwrecked is the final teaching in Michael Rood's epic love gift series on the book of Acts. But it's not for sale, and you won't see it on YouTube. The only way you can get it is to accept it as our gift, to say thank you for your donation to A Rood Awakening International. You'll get this exclusive teaching for your love gift donation of just $50. Or with a donation of $100 or more, you'll receive the teaching, plus a family-friendly card game featuring the spring and fall feasts of the Lord, and a silver-plated 7-branch menorah with symbols of each of the 12 tribes of Israel. Or for a gift of $300 or more, you'll receive the teaching, the Feasts of the Lord card game, the 12 tribes menorah, and a breathtaking silver-plated Kiddush fountain. Decorated with scenes from ancient Jerusalem, this 8-cup fountain is an elegant way to set the Sabbath apart each week. These gifts are available only in March. You'll get the Shipwreck teaching for a love gift donation of $50, the teaching, the Feasts of the Lord card game, and the 12 Tribes Menorah for a love gift of $100 or more. Or get everything plus the elegant Kiddush fountain for a love gift donation of $300 or more. Act now. Supplies are limited. Call 888-766-3610. That's 888-766-3610 or visit monthlylovegift.com.
See it now at A Rood Awakening International. The Temple Treasures exhibit. Remarkably accurate, full-scale replicas of the most precious furnishings in the tabernacle and the Second Temple. The Torah, the menorah, the table of showbread, and the altar of incense. plus the world's only accurate-sized model of Ron Wyatt's eyewitness account of the Ark of the Covenant, the Temple Treasures Exhibit. Book your tour now at templetreasuresexhibit.com.
And they gave them drink in vessels of gold, the vessels being diverse one from another. Now, a gold vessel of the weight that would be necessary in our day and time, each one of these vessels was between $8,000 and $10,000 just in gold weight itself. But we're talking about each one of these being intricately done, beautifully done, every one of them different, every one of them an exquisite piece of artwork. You could expect in our day and time, because there are such artisans in the land of Israel who do this magnificent work today, you could expect anywhere from $15,000 to $20,000 for every cup of which these grand kings are drinking from during this 7-day feast at the end of this 180-day extravaganza. And royal wine was in abundance, according to the state of the king. And he had the best Cabernet Sauvignon in the entire Mesopotamian valley, I guarantee you. And the drinking was according to the law. None did compel. Now, what does it mean? It doesn't mean that no one is compelled to drink. No, no one stopped anyone from drinking anything they wanted to have day and night for the entire period of time. This is the law. Whatever anyone wants, they get it. The best stuff in the entire empire is yours. This is the party of the emperor. All of the wealth of the empire is in his hands to show off and to treat his kings who are gathered for this very event. For so the king had appointed to all the officers of the house that they should do according to every man's pleasure, whatever they wanted. No, this is a buffet. This is, whatever is desired, this is what is made available. Also, Vashti, and the word Vashti means beauty, beautiful. But it's not just beautiful, it's ravishing beauty. And this is what this woman had going for her. She was an absolute stunning knockout, like the most gorgeous woman in the entire empire. And this is the name of the queen. Now, it's interesting that the name of Ahasuerus means, if I remain silent, I will become poor. And we're going to see what happens right here in the vanquishing of Vashti, that we understand his name and understand exactly what is going on. So Vashti, this ravishing beauty, the queen, made a feast for the women in the royal house which belonged to King Ahasuerus. And so, it's telling us, this palace, the royal house, it belongs to Ahasuerus. She married into this, and yet he gave her everything to throw a party for 7 days for the women. And again, anything that they wanted. There was nothing that was restrained from them. The men had their own party, the women had their own party. Sometimes that's a good way to do it. So the women get to talk about women things, the men get to talk about men things, and who knows what is going on in the women's court as far as the talk of the day. We can only imagine it, because these are the wives, the brides, the concubines of these kings that have been brought in. This is one elaborate party that is going on. On the 7th day, and this is, remember, 7-day feast, and this is the last day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine. It is now the end of the 6th month. It's the final day. This is the pinnacle of the celebration. He then commanded Mehuman, Biztha, Harbonah, Bigtha, Abagtha, Zethar, Carcass, the 7 chamberlains, who are the chief officers in the household of the king, his most trusted personal staff, and they were the ones that served in the presence of Ahasuerus, the king. And he commanded them to go and bring Vashti, the ravishing beauty, and bring the queen before the king with the royal crown. So this is an honor. They are going to place the royal crown upon Vashti, and she is going to be called in to show the people and the princes her beauty, for she was fair. She was more than fair. She was more than average. She was the stunning beauty, the knockout of the entire empire. And the king wants to bring her in a place of honor and to show her off because, you know, let's face it, it's his trophy bride. He could have anyone, and this is his trophy. But we're going to see that, you know, beauty sometimes is only skin deep. But the Queen Vashti refused to come at the king's commandment by his chamberlains. Therefore, the king was very wroth, and his anger burned in him. Now, I've heard people say, well, she was afraid that she was going to get raped or something. Oh, are you out of your mind? The bride of the king being brought in a procession of honor. What did she do? She disrespected her husband. She disrespected the emperor in front of everyone. Who knows what had been going on with the chit-chat with these women in the other room, but she decides, I'm not going in. I don't care what he says. I'm going to do it my way. I want to, you know, I've been drinking too. I don't want to go in. I look bad or whatever excuse was. Her husband brings her in at the culminating moment of this entire thing because he wants to show off his beautiful bride, and she disrespects him. And so now you understand why his anger burned in him. How could she do this to me? I'm the emperor. I get anything I want. And she's saying, no, she's not going to do it. Oh. Then the king said to the wise men, which knew the times. Now, it's not like they got a stopwatch on their arm or something, or a sundial in their pocket. No, these men are the ones that understand how to make laws to rule over an entire empire of people of diverse cultures. They are responsible to help the king hold things together with people with different religious systems. How do you make an empire work from the Indus River all the way to Ethiopia, all the way to Greece? How do you make this work? You have got to have some geniuses on your staff. And they realize the severity of what has just happened, and this cannot stand. So these men, which knew the times, so was the king's manner toward all those who knew law and judgment. And the next unto him was Karshina, Shathar, Admatha, Tarshish, Meres, Marsina, and Memucan, the 7 princes of Persia, which always saw the king's face and which sat first in the kingdom. These are the brain trust. These are his most trusted advisors, the ones that are responsible to make sure the empire runs smoothly. And he said, what shall we do to Queen Vashti according to the law? Because she has not performed the commandment of the king. If I remain silent, I will become poor. That's his name. She has not obeyed the commandment. She has disrespected me in front of all these women and in front of all these kings and princes in the entire empire. And if I remain silent, I will become poor. In verse 16, and Memucan answered before the king and all the princes, Vashti, this ravishing beauty you selected for your queen, hath not done wrong to the king only, but she has also wronged all the princes and all the people in all the provinces of the king Ahasuerus. For this deed of the queen shall come abroad unto all women, so that they shall despise. They will disrespect their husbands in their eyes. They will follow what the queen has done, and if this happens, we are in trouble. And when it is reported that the king Ahasuerus commanded Vashti the queen to be brought in before him, but she did not come in, likewise shall the ladies of Persia and Media say this day unto all the king's princes which have heard of the deed of the queen, and they're going to do the same thing. This is why this is so severe. See, let me finish this. Thus shall there arise too much, or an overabundance of contempt of women for their husband, in disrespecting their husbands, and the wrath that will ensue, because it is turning about the entire framework of life. See, women need to be loved. And the love languages of women vary from one woman to another. You know, some women love gifts, some women love cuddling, some women love, tender words and cards. This is what men have to do, especially when they get married. After the honeymoon wears off, they've got to understand, what does it take to communicate my love for my wife? Because what I think my wife needs may not be what my wife needs at all. But all women need love. But men need respect. And if men don't get respect, that is what is the number one cause of divorce and marriage breakup in the world. See, men being unfaithful to their wives in the workplace, it's not because they find a woman who is more beautiful. It's because if what is happening at home and in public, the woman is always disrespecting her husband. And if this disrespect goes on for so long, then the man's self-image and self-confidence then begins to go down, and it affects everything that happens in his life. And so if a woman in the workplace, she doesn't have to be a trophy wife like he already may have, but if a woman in the workplace will show respect to this man, that is the trap. A man will fall for that over and over and over again. And here, the most beautiful woman in the entire empire takes it upon herself to disrespect her husband in front of everyone, and we're going to find out that she is going to be discarded for this very thing. Let's continue on, because this is a lesson not only in ancient Mesopotamia, it is a lesson for today, because human nature does not change. Women need love, men need respect, and it has to be a two-way street. Perhaps Ahasuerus thought that letting his wife loose with unlimited expense account, credit cards, throw the biggest party you can ever dream of, woman, have a great time. Maybe he thought that that was her love language. That's what she wanted. But at the end of it, when he asked her to come in, then the blatant disrespect that the most brilliant minds in the empire know this cannot stand. It is not right. We have to nip this thing in the bud. And so Memucan continues on, verse 19. If it please the king, let there go a royal commandment from him, and let it be written among the laws of the Medes and Persians that it be not altered. Because once a law is signed into effect of the Medes and Persians, it cannot be changed. That is the law of the Medes and Persians. Vashti shall come no more before the king Ahasuerus. If I keep silent, I will become poor. Let the king give her royal estate unto another that is more deserving than she, and when the king's decree, which he shall make, shall be published throughout the empire, for his empire is truly great, then all of the wives, not only of the kings and the princes, but all the wives in the empire, shall give their husbands honor, respect, both the great and small, to those of low degree and the most exalted. The women will honor and respect their husbands if you do this. Now, this advisement pleased the king and the princes, and the king did according to the word of Memucan. He, if I remain silent, I will become poor, sent letters unto all the king's provinces, unto every province according to the writing thereof, and to every people after their language. And there are many languages. There are many cultures that this has got to go out according to the law of the Medes and Persians, so that everyone is made aware of this. And then when these kings take their wives back to their empires and this gets spread abroad, they are going to relate what happened in the capital, in Shushan, at the end of this 6-month World Fair party. And so, he sent letters into all the king's provinces, and to every province according to the writing thereof, and to every people after their language, that every man should bear rule in his own house, that the man should be the head of the house, and that it should be published according to the language of every people. We're going to take a break for just a moment to give you an opportunity to participate in this ministry. We are being broadcast in over 127 countries around the world. And this is amazing because I just realized this, 127 countries, and that is how many countries and kingdoms were under the reign of Ahasuerus. We are in 127 countries speaking the truth of the gospel of the kingdom, making people aware that the Torah is valid. It didn't pass away. Yeshua didn't come to destroy it. He came to verify it, to live it, and to clarify it as the prophet of whom Moses spoke. And we are getting the gospel of the kingdom out to the world so that people are delivered from man-made religion. No matter what man made it up, no matter what men concocted it, we are going back to the word of the Almighty and being obedient to it, living by his word and by the Spirit. And this is your opportunity to give, to be part of this ministry. And as we are reaching out to you, now you have the opportunity and the blessing of giving so that we can reach out to others like you who are hungering and thirsting after righteousness. We'll give you just a couple moments and we'll be back with you. And now we have a chapter break. I think the chapter break is really in the wrong place here. We have the edict that has gone out, a law, according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, that men should bear rule in their homes, that women should respect their husbands. And of course, if it's going to be a pleasant household, it doesn't even need to be said that men must love their wives. And that's the reason that a man and a woman come together to begin with in the first place, is because of the love, the affection that they have to each other. But again, that love has to be nourished by the husband, and the respect has to be nourished by the wife toward her husband. And because this didn't take place, now Vashti is vanquished. The most beautiful woman outwardly, but inside there is something deeply wrong with this woman, and she is not fit to be the bride of the king. And we now go into what transpires because of this, and this is why I believe this chapter marking really is in the wrong place. It was all added by men later anyway. So we're going to continue on. After these things, when the wrath of the king, Ahasuerus, if I remain silent, I would now be poor, he was appeased. The wrath of the king was appeased. And this is now 3 to 4 years later. According to chapter 2, verse 16, by the time that Hadassah is brought into the court of the king, it says it is now the 7th year of the reign of the king. His party, in which Vashti was vanquished, was back in the 3rd year of the reign of the king. Now Esther is brought in the 7th year. So this is between 3 and 4 years after Vashti is vanquished. And it says that he remembered Vashti and what she had done. And this is serious. Now, you know, he has other concubines. He's in no hard shape for, female companionship, but still there is something missing. He needs a bride who is worthy to be the queen, and he realizes that he made a big mistake the first time, that beauty is not everything. It's going to take much more in order for someone to be with him as he rules the empire. And so he remembered what Vashti had done, and even though his wrath was subsided, he knew that he had made a mistake. And there is probably a lot of heartache that went along with this, because Vashti doesn't indicate that she was executed, but no one else can have her. She is in seclusion. She is never going to see the king's face again. She is, all of her needs are taken care of, but she herself is not living much of a luxurious life, knowing that she will never have the companionship of a man. And he remembered what was decreed against her. In verse 2 it says, "Then said the king's servants that ministered to him, let there be fair, young, beautiful virgins sought for the king. And let the king appoint officers in all the provinces of his kingdom, that there may gather together all of the beautiful young virgins unto Shushan the palace, to the house of the women, under the custody of Haggai, the king's chamberlain, the keeper of the women. And let their things for purification be given them. And let the maiden which pleases the king be queen instead of Vashti." Instead of this ravishing beauty trophy wife that you picked out the first time, you need to find a young, beautiful virgin that pleases the king. And this thing that they said pleased the king, and he did so. See, this time he is now going to look for heart. He's going to look for intellect. He's going to look for a soulmate. And this is what's going to then bring us into the rest of the story, because the next verse says, "Now in Shushan the palace there was a certain Jew whose name was Mordecai." That's where we're going to pick up next week on this. But see, in order to get the context, in order to get the feel of what is going on, we have to understand, this is not modern day America. This is not a Greek world. This is basically an Eastern, an Oriental, an Arab world in which these people are living in. And one of the greatest helps to understand the Bible is to get back into the land, the language, the culture of the people so that it can fill in, so that you're not just reading words on a page. Like when I was describing the couches, you know, $10,000 worth of raw material itself, and having examples of this. See, living in the land of Israel, I have been led down paths to things that I would never, ever have even thought about going. I would never think about purchasing an expensive servants cover like this for my television programs, but it was given as a gift. And at $600 a meter, I wouldn't have been able to spend that. You know, at the time that I got this, we weren't even spending 6 shekels to ride on a bus. We would walk 3 miles instead of spending 6 shekels, because 6 shekels was like $1.25 back then. And so, you know, we were living very frugally. But yet the Almighty has his way of leading us down paths because he wants his word communicated to this generation. And so living in the land of Israel, I can then connect you with the land, the language, the culture. I can strip away a Western Gentile perspective and invite you to explore the Bible from a Hebrew, a Jewish perspective. And so that when we read the Gospels and the Gospel chronology, when we read that, I'm able to fill things in that could never happen had I not spent the last 15 years living in the land of Israel with my wife Judith. But to understand this, I want to tell you a story that was translated from Arabic into the French language back in the 1700s, and then from French into English. After that, in the early 1800s, it was then translated from Arabic into English, which was a much better job than going through these 2 steps from Arabic to French to English. But it is now known as 1001 Arabian Nights. It was originally 1001 Nights, but now it's become known as 1001 Arabian Nights. And I want to tell you a little bit about this story because it's kind of a parallel. It is a fiction, but this is basically how the story goes. There was a king in the empire. His brother was the emperor, but he was the king in his area and over his country. And he went out on a hunting trip and decided, after he had gotten out of town, they were camped, he decided that he was going to sneak back into town because he just loved his wife so much he wanted to see her that night. So he came back into town and found her to be unfaithfully embraced with the lowest of servants. He was absolutely infuriated. There was no doubt that, you know, he saw what was going on. They were in the boudoir together, and he took out his scimitar and killed them both, took their bodies, threw them out the window into the dry moat outside of the city. Then he immediately got out of the city, went back out to the camp as if nothing happened. But he was very depressed. And he decided that he was going to then go see his brother. As a matter of fact, the grand vizier of his brother sent great wealth to him and an invitation, please come visit him. And so he went to visit his brother, and his brother entertained him. He's the emperor. He's like Ahasuerus. He's like Xerxes. And so he's entertaining his brother, but yet something is wrong. And a hunting trip is again planned. And so he said, you know, I just don't feel good. Please go on. I'm going to stay behind. Well, at that point, he is overlooking the garden. And as soon as his brother, the emperor, leaves, all of his concubines and his wives they go out into the garden, and over the walls climb all the lowest of servants, and they are all engaged in an extramarital affair. Let's say it that way. And when he sees this, then he realizes that he is not the most pitiful person upon the earth. No, his brother, the emperor, has the very same thing. And so the next day, he's in uplifted spirits. He goes out and joins the hunting camp. And when he gets out there, he's kind of elated. And his brother then asks him, why are you so happy? What happened? You were so depressed before. Please, you have to tell me. I demand it. You are my subject. You're my brother, but you're my subject. You have to tell me why you're so depressed. And so finally, he told him the story of how he took his scimitar and in one swipe killed his wife and his lover, and that's what made him so depressed. And the emperor felt so bad for him. And then he said, but why now are you so positive? And he would not let him go. He finally said, I'm only telling you this because you are commanding me, but this is what had happened. When I went back, I saw your wife and all your concubines involved in the same thing. And the emperor couldn't believe it. And so he said, okay, follow me. They undercover snuck back in, got into the apartment where the king was staying, and then, as just before the sun set, then they saw the entire thing take place. Now the emperor is absolutely furious, and he has his wife strangled, all of the concubines killed, and then he decides, what am I going to do? Are there any faithful women in the empire? And so he decides that every night, every day, I'm going to marry another virgin. And in the morning, my grand vizier is then going to strangle them. That's going to keep them from being unfaithful to me. And so he does this week after week, month after month. The most beautiful maidens in the empire are brought before him. He marries them. And then the following morning, after the wedding night, the grand vizier has the job of strangling them to death. Probably not with his bare hands, probably with a cord, we don't know. Didn't give us the detail in the Arabian Nights. And so then, the grand vizier's daughter, after the weeping and wailing of all the inhabitants of all the cities in the king's realm, the people are terrified because one after another, every single day, another beautiful virgin is executed. So she went to her father and said, and the grand vizier's daughter was educated in philosophy. She had read all of the books in the empire. She was absolutely brilliant. She had a photographic memory. She was not only a treasure in beauty, she was a treasure in intellect. She understood the times. She understood how to communicate. And she was the absolute treasure of her father. And she also had a younger daughter, and she did not want her younger daughter, her younger sister, did not want her executed in the same way. So she went to her father and begged him, please present me as the next bride of the emperor. And so finally, her father relented because she said she had a plan. So her father relented, went to the emperor, and the emperor couldn't believe it. That this treasure of the grand vizier is now going to be his wife, and knowing that the next morning the grand vizier is the responsibility of strangling his oldest precious daughter. Such an honor. And so the wedding night came. And the young virgin said, my lord, allow my youngest sister to come. This is our last night. Let her be in the next chamber and let her come in and be with me because this is our last night together. And he relented. He said yes, because she was such a special girl. He could not deny the daughter of the grand vizier this simple one last pleasure. And so she made a deal with her younger sister. An hour before sunrise, you wake up and say, sister, tell me again, one last time, tell me a story. And so she woke her up, and the emperor was in the room and heard the whole thing. And so she begins telling her this story. And it is so captivating. It is so enthralling. And she ends with, and this, it gets even more incredible, more glorious. This story becomes even more glorious. And so at this point, she says to the emperor, please allow me to live one more night so that I can tell the rest of the story to my younger sister. And the emperor was so enthralled in this story, he said, why, yes, one more night so you can finish the story. He couldn't wait to hear the story. Couldn't wait. And so the next night, she then, the same thing, an hour before sunrise, she begins telling the rest of the story. And this goes on the next night and the next night. Without a question, the emperor says, please, I want to hear more of the story. And so for 1,001 nights, she weaves these intricate stories together that never end. They tie all together. And so you end up with the story of Sinbad the sailor and Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves. You end up with all these stories over these 1,001 nights. And it is, ladies and gentlemen, these stories are so incredible, so fascinating. A lot of them, they've made their way to Disney, but these are not children's stories, okay? The original unabridged is not children's reading by any stretch of the imagination, but they are such incredible stories that take you right back into that day and time. Because there is not a whole lot of technological difference between the times of Xerxes and the time of, they estimate, of Charlemagne in Europe, of which the 1,001 Nights were actually written at that time. But there's not a lot of technology difference. And so when you read this story, it just fills it in with so much depth and so much character. And so it is day after day, night after night. And at the end of 1,001 nights, when she comes to the conclusion of this intricate, interwoven story, she now has a young child, another baby on the way, and there is no way that the emperor is going to lose the absolute treasure of his life. She is not only striking in beauty, but everything about her is a virtuous woman. And this gives just a little bit of light into this situation of what is about to transpire in Babylon, in Shushan the palace. Because we are going to see that this is not fiction, ladies and gentlemen. This is real life. The name of the Almighty, Yod-He-Vav-He, does not appear anywhere in this text. But you can see his direction from the throne room of heaven in everything that goes on. And this is, in their day, the one world government, the one world empire. The law of the Medes and Persians is what stands, and we are going to see that the Jews are going to be singled out for complete extermination. Why? Because they keep the Torah. They worship not the emperor, but they worship the one true God. And because of this very thing, because they worship the one true God, we're going to see an Agagite, the offspring of King Agag, is going to put in play an extermination policy to wipe out every last person, and including the bride of the king. Ladies and gentlemen, this is what is playing out again in this generation. All the nations of the world are coming together again. A novus ordo seclorum, a totalitarian viewpoint of masters and slaves, of a Greek mindset of those who are the guardian class and the laity. And we are going to see that the Almighty's hand is not short in this day and time. that the Almighty is able to preserve his people. He can orchestrate things beyond the wildest imagination. And when you see what the Almighty does in response to those who decide they are going to risk their life to do the right thing, you are going to see that heaven is on the side of the righteous, and that he has a plan to preserve and to save his people in the most desperate of times, when it looks like there is no hope, when the people have no way to protect themselves. Every bit of ability to arm themselves and protect themselves against what is going to come to pass, their complete annihilation, it turns completely about because the Almighty is still in charge of the universe. So join us again next week as we go into Hadassah and the purification. Enough with the myrrh already. Now, I would like to leave you with this blessing. This is the blessing that the priest of Aaron, the Aaronic priesthood, were commanded to put the name of the Almighty, Yod-He-Vav-He, upon the people. And when they speak this particular blessing, the Almighty will hear from heaven, and he will then bless his people. See, I don't need to know what your problems are. I don't need to know what your needs are. All I need to do is be obedient to what the Scripture says to do. And I'm not going to speak this blessing under the authority of the Aaronic priesthood, far from it. I'm going to speak it under a far greater authority. The authority of the priesthood of the Melchizedek, the King of righteousness, Yeshua, who is the high priest forever after the order of the Melchizedek, and he has made us priests and kings. And I will speak this blessing, and you then can receive this blessing. I am going to hold my hands in the way that the priest would hold their hands to signify Yud, He, Vav, He, when it became illegal for the priest to actually speak the name. But they would hold their hands in this form. Now, of course, many of you recognize this from Star Trek, Leonard Nimoy, Live Long and Prosper. He's Jewish, a Cohen, okay? This is the intergalactic blessing, live long and prosper, but really the Aaronic blessing is so much deeper. It is so much richer than that, because this is what the Almighty said to do. And so now, if you'll receive this blessing, I now speak it under the authority of the Kohen Gadol forever after the order of the Melchizedek. Yivarechecha Yehovah v'yishmerecha. Ya'ir Yehovah panav elecha v'chunaka. Yisa Yehovah panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. B'shem Yeshua HaMashiach Sar Shalom. Yehovah bless you and keep you. Yehovah make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. Yehovah lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. In the name of Yeshua, the Prince of Peace. Amen and amen. Shabbat Shalom, Shavua Tov. Have a good week, and I'll see you next week.
Well, welcome to our Purim broadcast, 8 till midnight tonight only. And Michael, this is a preview really for what's happening, another special thing, this coming Friday, March 13, our first ever double feature of Shabbat Night Live.
That's the only way we could get all of the teaching on the doctrine of baptisms in before our Passover celebration. And this is absolutely critical information every believer needs to know and understand. So enjoy the time that we have together for Purim. And now, on Friday night, join us for our double feature.
That's right. Starts normal time, 8 p.m. Eastern, and it'll go all until we're done. 2 episodes back to back. Join us then.
Purim, the making of a king's bride. In our last episode, we stepped into the world of Achashverosh, in which there was a 6-month world fair, at the end of which a 7-day feast. This was displaying all the glory, all the wealth of the empire of Achashverosh, which is most likely Xerxes, which spanned all the way to the Indus River in India, all the way back to Ethiopia, right up to Greece. And we see that at the end of this world fair, at the end of this culminating event, he asked his most beautiful bride, his wife, his queen, to have the royal crown put on her, and then that she would come before her husband and the entire gala celebration. His wife, Queen Vashti, then despised her husband and insulted her husband in front of everyone. And it was at that point that all of the rulers of the empire were all together, and they said, this cannot stand. If this word goes out that Vashti has insulted, that she has degraded the emperor in front of everyone, it is going to be complete mayhem in the entire empire. So they gave the counsel, and it was written in the law of the Medes and the Persians that cannot be changed, that Vashti would be removed from being queen, and that at that point, a decree went out to the entire empire that men should bear rule in their house, that they should be respected in their homes. The queen was loved, but the queen didn't respect her husband, and so then Vashti was put out. And so the vanquishing of Vashti is what we covered last week. And then we started into chapter 2 of Esther, and this is where we're going to pick it up at this time. So please take your Bibles and turn to Hadassah, or Esther, chapter 2, and we're going to step back just a little bit from where we were last episode and read. And after these things, when the wrath of the king Achashverosh, which means if I remain silent, I will become poor, his wrath was appeased. He remembered Vashti and what he had done and what was decreed against her. And then the king's servants that ministered unto him said, let there be fair young virgins sought for the king. And let the king appoint officers in all the provinces of the kingdom, that they may gather together all the fair young virgins unto Shushan the palace, to the house of the women, under the custody of Hege, the king's chamberlain, keeper of the women. And this is a time that there is a great deal of heartache in the empire, because the king is looking for a bride. And so he has men go out, and he is looking for the most beautiful women, the most beautiful virgins in all of the empire. Now, these are the fairest of all the land. And so you know that from a youth that the parents of other young men have had their eye on Hadassah and all these other women that are out there, and there are plans that are being made. Weddings have already been planned years, decades in advance. And now we see that these young virgins are being taken away from their homes, taken away from the young men that love them, that are planning on marrying them, and there is hardship. There are tears throughout the kingdom. Everyone is upset because they spend one night with the king, and then they go into the house of the concubines, and they will never, ever see another man in their life. They're going to be kept by eunuchs and by maidens. They're going to have all their needs taken care of, but if the king doesn't want them anymore, that's the last time that they see them. And so all their hopes and dreams for a family and all just vanish if they are selected. And so last week, as we were talking about this and going back into the old Arabic fable, 1001 Nights, or 1001 Arabian Nights as it's become known, we get a little bit of a picture of what this is like. And yet these girls aren't going to be executed the next morning like in the tale of 1001 Nights, but their life is over. And so now we see that this is the commandment that's gone throughout the empire, and it says that in verse 4, let the maiden which pleases the king, we'll back up, and let there be things given to her for her purification, and then let the maiden that pleases the king be queen instead of Vashti, which means ravishing beauty, or trophy wife. And the thing pleased the king, and he did so. Now, we pick it up where we left off last time. Now in Shushan the palace, there was a certain Jew whose name was Mordecai, the son of Yair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, a Benjamite. Now this is very important. See, genealogies in the Bible and all these names of who begat who, the first time that you read through the scriptures, you know, you don't have to pay a whole lot of attention to it. You don't have to get encumbered with a lot of these things, because you need to read through the scriptures over and over and over again anyway. And the first time, these names will mean absolutely nothing to you. But these do mean something, because first of all, we see that it was the Mordecai, the son of Yair, the son of Shimei, who was the son of Kish. Now, wait just a minute, a Benjamite. This is Kish. I'm going to take you back to 1 Samuel. 1 Samuel chapter 9, verse 1. Now there was in the days, there was a man of Benjamin whose name was Kish, the son of Aviel, the son of Zevor, the son of Berachot, the son of Phaphia, a Benjamite, a man of power, and he had a son whose name was Shaul, a good, choice young man, and a goodly man. And there was not among the children of Israel a goodlier person than he. From his shoulders and upwards, he was higher than all the people. He could put out his arms. Everyone in the land of Israel could walk underneath his arms. He was that big. Now we see that Mordecai is of this lineage. He is, it says, the son of Kish, but there are like 480 years, just dozens of generations between Kish and Saul, and finally Mordecai. But Mordecai was almost royalty. And why I say almost royalty, let's continue on in 1 Samuel. We're going to go to chapter 15, because this is very important to understand for the story of Esther, or Hadassah, to make sense. In 1 Samuel chapter 15, verse 1, Samuel said unto Saul, the king, Yehovah sent me to anoint you to be king over this people, over Israel. Now therefore, hearken unto the voice of the words of Yehovah. Thus saith Yehovah Tzevaot, I remember that which Amalek did to Israel, how he laid in wait for him in the way when he came out from Egypt. Now go and smite Amalek, utterly destroy all that they have and spare them not, but slay both man and woman, infant and suckling, ox and sheep and camel and ass. Now you ask yourself, why be so ruthless? Well, first of all, when we're coming out of Egypt, it tells us that the Amalekites attacked from the rear, attacked the infirm and the women and the children. They were absolute bloodthirsty, merciless cowards. Much of what we see happening in the land of Israel today, we see suicide bombers, homicide bombers go into like women's and children's shoe stores and go into Passover Seders and go where people are completely unprotected. They don't go and literally do combat with those who are worthy of doing combat with. No, they look for little babies and women and children. As a matter of fact, in Nablus, and why it's called Nablus is because the Arabs can't pronounce a P. It was Neapolis or New City, or the ancient city of Shem. They actually have a display there, which is partially funded by the United Nations, I believe. And this whole display is a museum which shows the Sbarro restaurant that a bomber went in and blew all these women and children up. And so now they have a museum showing these dismembered babies and women that are all torn apart, and a few men that are in there with blood and guts splattered all over the place. And they go in there, it's a place of celebration. See, they have a new nomenclature or a name, but ladies and gentlemen, these are the same Amalekites. They were renamed Palestinians by the United Nations 50 years ago, but you see the same thing going on. And this is why the Almighty said, get rid of them. Now let's take a look, let's get a little bit deeper into this, because in Numbers 14:25, it says, now the Amalekites and the Canaanites dwelt in the valley. What valley is it speaking of? We now know it as the Great Rift Valley or the Dead Sea Valley. But what was going on among the Canaanites down in that valley? See, to understand why these people had to be taken out by the commandment of the Almighty, and Saul was told to do this as king, is because these are some very perverse, sick, twisted people that as long as they are allowed freedom, they will continue to torture, maim, and kill individuals. And so to understand, these Amalekites and the Canaanites dwelling together. So now, whatever these Canaanites are into, the Amalekites now get into down in the Dead Sea Valley. Remember Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, Zeboim? Okay, those 4 cities destroyed by fire and brimstone because of the gross sexual perversion that these people were into. Canaanites. Well, where did the Canaanites go back to? All we have to do is take a look back at Genesis. And in Genesis chapter 9, we read where Noah, after the flood, planted a vineyard. He drank of the wine and was drunken when he was uncovered in his tent. It doesn't say by whom he was uncovered. And then it says, and Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father, told his 2 brethren without. Shem and Japheth took a garment, laid it on their shoulders, went backward and covered the nakedness of their father, and their faces were backward, and they saw not their father's nakedness. Now, why does it say Ham, the father of Canaan? First of all, it says the sons of Ham were Cush, Mitzrayim, Egypt, Put, and Canaan. Canaan was the youngest, or in biblical English, the younger of the sons of Ham. And so right here it tells us that Ham, who is the father of Canaan, was the one that discovered this. He went and saw this and went out and told his brothers. His brothers went in and took care of the situation. And when Noah awoke, it says in verse 24 of Genesis 9, when he awoke, he knew what his younger son had done unto him. Whose younger son? Not Noah's younger son, but Ham's younger son. Who is Ham's younger son? It's Canaan. See, Ham is not Noah's younger son. Shem is the younger or youngest son of Noah. Japheth is the eldest. But when he saw what Ham's younger son did unto him, he said, cursed be Canaan. He cursed him. And we see that the Canaanites take that which they are, and they are cursed for this, and they take it over into the land which Israel is eventually going to be deeded through Abraham. And it is rampant with sexual perversion, with sun god worship. They take, when the Tower of Babel transpires, and this pagan sun god worship is scattered all over the earth, it's the Canaanites, the offspring of Canaan, who with their sexually perverse world take it over to this land, and they're squatting on the land. They were not given this land. They're squatting on the parcel of land through which all the trade routes go through. Well, the Almighty has already decided. He has already divided up the nations according to the number of the sons of Israel. He has scattered them at the Tower of Babel, 70 nations, and he's going to choose one nation, the sons of Israel, to be his priests, to be his prophets, and he's going to put them in the trade routes of all the world so that they can be priests and kings to the entire world, so that they can reconcile the world to God. See, at the Tower of Babel, the Almighty did the world a favor, confused the languages. Babylonian sun god worship was spread out through the world. The sexual perversion of Canaan was then isolated, and the Almighty said, I'll take care of these sexual perverts later. You know, by the time you have a sexual perversion named after your city, Sodom or sodomy, you know it's a bad place. You know, it's slavery, pedophilia. These are the people that originated kidnapping people and using them as sex slaves, okay? This is what is going on, and then they would just murder them. Same thing that's going on in a lot of countries today. As a matter of fact, that is what our president, Theodore Roosevelt, had to deal with the Barbary pirates. They were kidnapping Americans over there, the Barbary pirates, Muslim pirates, and they were selling people for sex slaves, and then, of course, trying to get money for their release. And other governments were paying millions of dollars every year for this very thing, to get their citizens released. Finally, Teddy Roosevelt said, enough. We are sending the Marines to the shores of Tripoli, and we're going to take care of this. But he said, this isn't the end. We're going to have to deal with them again. And unfortunately, we're dealing with them again. They run planes in the World Trade Center. Just all sorts of sick stuff is going on through the sons of Canaan and the Amalekites. So now you understand why Shaul was told, you get rid of every last one of these people, because they are murderers. They will continue doing what they've always done. Now we're going to continue on a little bit further into this, because now we see that the background of Mordecai is Saul. That means his cousin, Hadassah, is almost royalty. And the almost royalty goes a long ways here, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to see exactly how that plays out. Now, we're going to go into verse 6. And Mordecai, who'd been carried away from Jerusalem with the captivity, which had been carried away with Jeconiah, the king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had carried away. And he brought up Hadassah. That is Esther, as it says. He brought up Hadassah, that is Esther. Now, why is she going to be named Esther? Well, we're going to find out about that in verse 10, but her Hebrew name is Hadassah. The pagan name that she will be given, for good reason, is Esther, or Easter. It is literally Easter, and remember, we're in Babylon. So we're going to touch on that in just a minute. And it says that Mordecai was his uncle's daughter. So that means that Hadassah is Mordecai's cousin. And for she had neither father nor mother, and the maid was fair and beautiful, whom Mordecai, when her father and mother were dead, took his cousin for his own daughter. In verse 8, so it came to pass, when the king's commandment and his decree was heard, and when many maidens were gathered together unto Shushan the palace, to the custody of Hegai, that Hadassah was brought also unto the king's house, to the custody of Hegai, keeper of the women. This is completely out of her control, out of Mordecai's control. Nobody can do anything about this. Nothing can be done about this. Now, she will never have another man in her life, and she is destined now to live forever in the court of the king. And the maiden pleased him. And this is Hegai, the keeper of the women. The maiden pleased him, and she obtained kindness of him. And he speedily gave her things for purification with such things as belonged to her, and 7 maidens. So there was something about this girl that was so special. Her intellect, her beauty, and her the standard by which this woman lived, because she was raised in a house of a Jew. She was raised to respect her cousin who was taking care of her. She was obedient to him, and we will see, just as she would have been to her parents. She respected and obeyed Mordecai. And so there was something about this, the respect, the intelligence, the absolute knock-down, dead, just beauty of this woman. Everything about her was so absolutely superb that he gave her everything that she needed, and 7 maidens. And it says he preferred her and her maids to the best place of the house of the women. He gave her the very best. Hadassah had not showed, in verse 10, Hadassah had not showed her people nor her kindred because Mordecai had charged her that she should not show it. Now we understand why her name, when she goes in to the court of the king, to the chamber where Haggai is going to then groom her and get her ready to meet the king, that her name is no longer Hadassah. It's Easter. Well, see, you got to give her a good name, and she has to be able to live up to this. Now, who is Easter, first of all? Well, we have to go all the way back to ancient Babylon before the confusion of languages, when Nimrod was worshipped as a god. Well, what happened is that Nimrod was killed, his body was hacked into little pieces, spread throughout the land of Shinar, which should have effectively ended the worship of Nimrod. But no, his wife, Semiramis, not willing to let the kingdom slip through her fingers so easily, said that Nimrod really didn't die. He's ascended up into heaven and has now become the sun god. And so Semiramis appointed priests, mathematicians, magicians, who would be the ones who would develop the worship of Nimrod as a sun god. They're the mathematicians that divided the year into 4 quadrants: winter solstice, summer solstice, the vernal and autumnal equinoxes, the shortest day of the year, the longest day of the year, and the years in the spring and fall of equal daylight and equal darkness. Winter solstice, summer solstice, vernal, autumnal equinox. Amen. And so now they put in place the worship of the sun. December 25th was the winter solstice on the ancient Babylonian calendar before the precession of the equinoxes, which brings us to around December 20th to 21st today. But December 25th, that's when it all started. The rebirth of the sun, this is when Nimrod ascended, was ascended into heaven. And in fact, the son of Nimrod, the reborn sun god, Tammuz, going to be born on December 25th. That's a little bit in the future. So now what happens is that Semiramis is in charge of the kingdom. Everything is going well. She becomes pregnant much later, not by way you might expect. No, the rays of the sun impregnated her. Her dead husband Nimrod now impregnated her, and she is going to bring forth the reincarnated sun god, little baby Tammuz, on December 25th. Okay? And don't let that be a shock to you out there in the Christian world. Think, oh, I thought that was Jesus' birthday. No, even the Pope knows better. And the Pope hardly knows anything. But even the Pope in his latest book said that that's nonsense, okay? Well, you have all of the pagan gods, from Zeus to Jupiter to Ra to Tammuz to Mithra, all born on December 25th, because it all goes back to Babylonian sun worship. Now, what happened is that Semiramis finally dies. She ascends up into the heavens. The gods send her back to the earth in a giant egg, which plummets into the Euphrates River on the first Sunday after the vernal equinox. The egg bursts open, and out emerges Semiramis, reincarnated as Easter, the bare-breasted sex goddess who turns a bird into an egg-laying rabbit. That's why now in America they have this Playboy magazine. And what is it? It's the goddess of fertility. It's a sex goddess. What's the symbol? It's a bunny rabbit. It's an egg-laying rabbit. It goes right straight back to Babylon, ladies and gentlemen. Now, what better name for this Jewish girl who's going to be taken into the court of the king than the name that is revered by all of the pagan sun god worshipers, Easter. And there's already a feast that's already set for Easter. We're going to see that they're going to dedicate that and have the feast of Easter for Hadassah, who's been renamed Easter in a little bit. So now we go on. And so we see Mordecai in verse 11 walked every day before the court of the women's house to know how Hadassah did and what should become of her. And when every maid's turn was come to go into King Ahasuerus, after that they had been 12 months, according to the manner of women. For so were the days of their purification accomplished, to wit, 6 months with oil of myrrh, 6 months with sweet odors, and with other things for the purifying of the women. Now, this 12-month program, this is what it takes in the making of a king's bride. We're going to take a short break right now because this broadcast is going out all around the world. And freely you are receiving. And this is your opportunity by the command of the scriptures and what Yeshua said. Freely you have received, now freely give. This is by no means free from this end, but we are getting this out free to you and ministering to you and preaching the gospel of the true kingdom, not a sick, twisted prosperity or a grace perversion gospel. This is the gospel that Yeshua taught, that Yeshua said must be preached in all the world. And so this is your opportunity right now. Stop what you're doing and decide, I am going to get involved. I'm not going to be an innocent bystander. I'm not going to be a freeloader. I'm getting fed, and I'm going to give just like if I were sitting in a hard oak pew, listening to someone drivel on about something they know nothing about. Decide you're going to support this ministry, and we'll be back in 2 minutes. Not every woman in the kingdom would trade her hopes and dreams for family, for friends, for living the way that her parents and grandparents had lived, to leave the community and be completely separated for the rest of her life. Not that many of them were that excited about it. And so you can imagine the state of these milkmaids out there that were selected to be groomed for one night with the king. In the course of this, we can only imagine that these girls that wanted to stay out of it, they let themselves go a little bit. First of all, we're talking about country girls, okay? They're not wearing high-heeled shoes and prancing around town with the latest jewelry, okay? They are barefoot. They are milkmaids. They're working out in the fields. Their hands are cracked and rough. They smell like sheep and goats. Their feet are all calloused and gnarly. Their fingernails are used for sewing and for opening up pecans and everything else. They are working girls. It's a working class world out there. Everyone works except for the Jews 7 days a week. It's the Jews who take off 1 day a week. Unless you are perhaps Hadassah, who is almost royalty, who lives in the capital of Shushan, a lot of these girls were rough. And if they didn't really want that one night with the king, and they really wanted to get married, you can imagine their hair. By the time that the king's men went around to choose them, their hair was probably looked like a rat's nest. They got cow dung and sheep dung on their clothes. They look like they just been dipped in a pile of mud and pulled out again. They want these people to just keep on going. I'm not willing to trade my life for one night with the king. And so now you bring all these girls into the capital, and they've got 1 year. And it says, 6 months with oil of myrrh. Well, this isn't something that is particularly pleasant, ladies and gentlemen. Oil of myrrh. Oil of myrrh. Myrrh is the most spoken of oil or fragrance or incense in all the Bible. Even more than frankincense, myrrh is the most spoken of. In high dosages, it can be toxic. It's a very powerful essential oil. The therapeutic properties are, it's anti-inflammatory, it's antimicrobial, it's an antifungal, it's also a sedative. This is what Yeshua was offered: vinegar, spoiled wine, and that's what you get. If you don't preserve it rightly, you get vinegar, nasty tasting vinegar with myrrh in it. This is a sedative. This is a painkiller that Yeshua was offered. This is not how it's going to be used for these girls, though. It is also excellent for gum and mouth disorders, for gingivitis and pyorrhea and spongy gums and other things that people get in real life. On the skin, it's used for boils, on skin ulcers, on chapped and cracked skin, ringworm, weeping wounds, eczema, and athlete's foot, or maybe milkmaid's foot. And how this is used, this antimicrobial, fungicidal, how it's used is that the feet are bathed in this, and the hands and the body are bathed in this, and then those responsible for getting this young virgin ready, they take a grinding stone, like you would, like a mortar and pestle, like, a rough pumice, and they will grind away those calluses. And when they grind away these calluses and this chapped, dead skin and all, it's got to be antimicrobial, antifungal, because they could get infections if not, because they work on them, they grind it down, and it is painful. They bring it right to the point of bleeding to try to get rid of all these calluses and these gnarly fingernails and all, and this takes 6 entire months. You can't imagine it. I think you'd have to go back in time to the mountains of West Virginia or something, a couple hundred years ago, to find people that, with no shoes that actually worked hard enough so they would take 6 months just to start to get them cleaned up. It's painful. And getting ready to be the bride of the king is a painful process. And it's not just getting rid of the physical calluses. It's getting rid of the diction, the language, the cultural way that they're speaking in the area, because you don't want to bring a hick into the court of the king. You don't want someone that uses improper Chaldean. They are going to, if they're going to be the bride of the king, they are going to represent the empire as Vashti, a 7-day feast with women, unlimited credit card account. She could do anything she wanted. And when she threw a party, it was a party. I'll tell you, all the rough edges were off this woman. She was groomed. She was schooled. And we see later that Hadassah is actually going to have a banquet, a 2-day banquet for the king. Do you think she was schooled in what the king's going to want? Do you think she is going to serve him oysters on the half shell if he's keeping kosher? No, it's everything that you need to know to be the queen. And all these rough edges have got to be ground away. You've got to know your future husband. Very important. You have to know your future husband. And if you don't know him, you are going to be in trouble when it all comes down to it. Now, let's continue on with this right here. Because after 6 months of the process of myrrh, and that is grinding away, that is trimming down, and that is getting her in a state that is suitable, getting rid of her past. Now she's going to be groomed for the future. And so 6 months of sweet odors and other things for the purifying of the women. This is where she's going to be trained in the philosophies. She is going to be educated in what's going on in the palace. She's going to understand all the protocols. As we see later, that Hadassah knows that if she approaches the king, not being called for it, she can be executed for it. See, these are all the things that these women have got to know, and it's going to take an entire year to be able to do that. Now, I want to talk about this for just a minute, because there are things that we can equate to being the bride of Messiah, okay? Now, I recognize, and you should too, that the bride of Messiah is a figure of speech. It's a figure of speech. And we see that in Matthew 10:24, Yeshua speaks of his followers as his disciples, as his trained one. And later, Yeshua speaks of his disciples as servants. Then we see that they're spoken of as friends. At this time when a king, Yeshua said, there was a certain king that made a marriage for his son. Now, some people say, because it says the word certain, that means there really was that particular king. Like, there was a certain man named Lazarus who laid at the gate of a rich man. And there was a certain rich man. That means it was really true. No, it is speaking a figure of speech. A certain king made a wedding for his son. And he sent out people to invite everyone in to the wedding. And finally, at the end, someone came in without a wedding garment, and he called them friend. And he said, send him out into utter darkness, bind him hand and foot. There's going to be weeping and wailing and gnashing of teeth. To be called and not prepared, for many are called, but few are chosen, or in simple English, few choose to respond in an appropriate manner. We see that he throws these friends out who have been invited to this. So, he refers to some of his followers as friends. But then in John 15:5, Yeshua says, no, I'm not going to call you servants any longer. I'm going to call you friends. Oh, that sounds bad. He's calling us friend. The last time I heard the term friend, he was binding us hand and foot and throwing us into utter darkness. See, each one of these is a different picture. You can't lump it all together. Another time, he says, okay, I'm not going to call you a servant anymore, I'm going to call you friend. But then in Romans 1:1, Shaul says that Paul, Shaul, a servant of Yeshua Messiah. Oh, maybe Shaul didn't get the memo that we're not to be called servants anymore, but we're to be called friends. And so now we're going to start the Quakers called friends. Wait just a minute. I don't think John got the revelation either, because in the opening of Revelation, it speaks of, this is the revelation that Yeshua gave his disciples to then tell his servants the thing which must come to pass. And it was sent and signified by his servant, doulos, Yohanan. They were called doulos, or a bondslave, not just a servant who does the orders of the master, but one has been set free and then becomes a bondslave by a choice. In Matthew 21, we're referred to as guests. In Ephesians 6, we're referred to as wrestlers, WWF wrestlers, no doubt. In Matthew 5, it speaks of the kingdom of heaven being like unto 10 virgins, 5 wise virgins and 5 moros, or as we would say in English, 5 morons. Okay? You want the biblical usage of the word moron? There it is. 5 wise virgins and 5 moron virgins. All right? And then in Mark, we're called husbandmen or farmers. In 1 Corinthians, we're called, it says, we are the body of Christ, King James. We are the body of Messiah. But then in Romans 7:4, it says, by the body of Messiah, we have been delivered. Wait, does that mean that we are the body of Messiah and we delivered ourselves? No. Again, these are different figures. They are different examples at different times. And this is what happens, ladies and gentlemen, is that people want to say, well, this group of people is the bride of Messiah. These people are the wedding guest. These people are the moron virgins. These people are, these people are the soldiers. These people are the boxers. These people are the ambassadors. These people are the builders. These people are the priests and kings. These people are the saints. No, you can't take all these metaphors, all these figures of speech, all these parables and mix them up and then redefine things completely outside of what the scripture is communicating. We are the bride of Messiah. But that's not all that we are. We are wrestlers. We're runners. We're fighters. We're builders. We're saints. We are guests. We're bondslaves. We're all these things. Keep it in context, people, and then it will all make sense. But in that motif of the making of a king's bride, we read in Revelation 19:7, let us be glad and rejoice and give honor to him, for the marriage of the Lamb has come. This is after the 7 bowls of wrath are poured out and a cry goes out of the throne room, it is finished. The angel says, no one enters the Mishkan in heaven until the bowls of wrath are poured out, and then at the end it is finished. And then it says, the marriage of the Lamb has come, and his wife has made herself ready. And to her it was granted that she should be arrayed in fine linen, clean and white, for the fine linen is the righteousnesses of the saints. As some versions have it, the righteous acts of the saints. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, the bride must come with the garments cleaned up. Not in the filthy, stinking garments of Babylonian paganism, or as a milkmaid. You don't come to the marriage supper of the Lamb just as I am. That's where you start, just as you are. Then it is as long as it takes to get rid of the pagan sun god worship, to get rid of all these things that the scripture calls abominations. This is your responsibility. Oh, you'll be given some maids to help out. Some other people say, you're off your rocker. You're completely out to lunch. You need to get cleaned up. Quit putting that phallic symbol Christmas tree in the front of your church. Get rid of the paganism. You want to get married to the Lamb, you better hate the things he hates. You better love the things he loves. You better get ready. Because if you come in without your right garments on, you are going to be bound hand and foot and thrown into outer darkness. And I really don't think that that's what that parable is all about. I think that parable is saying, don't think you're going to show up in your stinking garments. You ain't getting in, period. And I'll tell you, there will be weeping and wailing and gnashing of teeth, the lost opportunities, because the righteous acts of the saints. Salvation is of grace, works are of merit, and you don't get into the marriage supper of the Lamb just as you are. Jesus didn't do it all. He paid the price, the death penalty, and he says, now walk in me, learn of me. Understand who I am. Do my will. Do the Father's will. Get cleaned up. You do the work, and I'm going to give you authority over 10 cities. You're going to be a king. You're going to rule as a king if you do what I ask you to do. Righteous acts of the saints, that's what the bride is adorned in. And you're not getting into the marriage supper without them. In Revelation 21:2, it says, I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. New Jerusalem is not the bride. They're saying that New Jerusalem looks like a bride adorned for a husband. It's going to take us then 9 more verses when an angel comes down and says, come, and I will show you the bride, the Lamb's wife. Then it takes 18 more verses. It keeps on describing this city, and then finally, the inhabitants of the city who get to dwell with the Lamb. The Lamb's wife now lives with them forever in this magnificent, majestic city. There's no way to describe the Lamb's wife except those who have purged themselves from all of the things that are distasteful to the king. The making of the bride's wife. We have to know the bridegroom. We have to have our garments washed, clean, and white. The bridegroom said, do not think that I have come to destroy the Torah. In his first recorded public words, do not think for 1 second I've come to destroy the law. Greek, nomos. Hebrew, nomos is Torah. I didn't come to destroy the Torah of the prophets. I didn't come to destroy but fulfill. I'm going to tell you that one jot, one tittle, one vowel and one consonant, as it says in the ancient Hebrew text of the Gospel of Matthew, not one vowel or consonant will pass from the Torah till all is fulfilled. Whoever breaks one of the least commandments in the Torah and teaches men to do so should be called least in the kingdom of heaven. Bound hand and foot, if you please. Okay? And then at the end of this very recitation, he says, not those who call me Lord, not those who call me Lord are going to enter the kingdom. Those who do the will of my Father. I will profess to many who purport to follow me in that day, the many who called me Lord, depart from me. I never knew you. You who work anomia. Without nomos Torah. You who are without Torah, out of here. I don't know you. Wow. You better get to know the king. You want to spend more than one night with the king, then you better get to know him. Let's continue on. Verse 13. Then thus came every maiden unto the king. Whatsoever she desired was given to her to go with her out of the house of women into the king's house. In the evening she went, and on the morrow she returned into the second house of the women. Now she is technically a concubine. No man will ever touch her. Up to this point, up to this night with the king, she could then be rejected, sent home. Oh, go marry Frank down the street. Okay? But now she's sent into the second house of the woman to the custodia of Shaashgaz, the king's chamberlain, which kept the concubines. She did not come into the king anymore, except the king delighted in her, and that she were called by name. He doesn't say, yeah, give me that one with the, with the chestnut hair tonight. No. He has to know her name. She has to be that important that she is known by him. Now, when the turn of Hadassah, the daughter of Abihail, which means the mighty, the uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her for his daughter, was come to go into the king, she required nothing but what Hegai, the king's chamberlain, the keeper of the women, appointed. And Esther obtained favor in the sight of all that looked upon her. So Esther was taken into the house of Ahasuerus, into his house royal in the 10th month, which is in the month Tevet, in the 7th year of his reign. If you know what the month Tevet is, you need to get the astronomically and agriculturally corrected biblical Hebrew calendar, because until you get your mind out of the pagan calendar that we inherited from Rome, in which every day of the month is of the week is named after a pagan god, every month of the year named after a different pagan god, until you step back into the biblical reckoning of time, things like this they'll just go by you. But it's the 7th year now, and she is called in after a year of preparation. And the king loved Hadassah above all the women, and she obtained grace and favor in his sight more than all the virgins, so that he set the royal crown upon her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. Then the king made a great feast unto all his princes and servants, the feast of Easter. Now, what is this feast of Easter? Well, first of all, we have to step back, because Semiramis' a child, Tammuz, little baby Tammuz, which we read about in Ezekiel 8, about the women weeping for Tammuz there. Well, the little baby Tammuz should have lived forever, since he was a reincarnated sun god, but not so. In his 40th year, he was gored to death by a wild boar in a freak hunting accident. So the worshipers of the reborn sun god set aside 40 days of weeping for Tammuz, in which the sun god worshipers would deny themselves of pleasure in this life for the pleasure of Tammuz in his afterlife. And it started out with a big sex orgy, then they denied themselves of pleasure, and then at the end, when his mother was reincarnated as Easter, the bare-breasted sex goddess, on Easter Sunday, they would roast the pig that gored Tammuz and eat ham on Easter Sunday. That's the Feast of Easter. So they had a big celebration. It was the Easter celebration. Oh yes, they had the eggs all dyed red like they still do in the Greek Orthodox Church, because they used to in the satanic worship of the Canaanites. They would sacrifice. First of all, they would impregnate virgins on the altar of Easter on Easter Sunday. A year later, 9 months later, these little children who are now born, and so 9 months later, now we got 3-month-old children, and these 3-month-old babies are now sacrificed on the altar of Easter. They dye the eggs of Easter in the blood of sacrificed infants, and now we still keep dyeing Easter eggs in our churches, which is nothing but child sacrifice memorials. The Almighty said, do not learn the way of the heathen. Do not learn how they worship and serve their gods, and do the same thing and do it to me. It's an abomination. It is tovah. It is sheket. It is utterly disgusting, putrid, wretched, and vile. And yet we do this and we say we're doing it for him. No, we are doing it as a satanically inspired rehearsal of what pagans did. For they have even burned their children in the fire to other gods. Oh, I'll tell you. So you got the Feast of Easter going on. And in the remainder of verse 18, he made a release to the provinces and gave gifts according to the state of the king. And when the virgins were gathered together the second time, then Mordecai sat in the king's gate. So this is another roll of young virgins that are being brought in for this. But, the position of queen, sorry, it's been filled. Now you get to fit into the concubine mode. I guess the king really liked this concept of getting all the beautiful young virgins in the empire, and then he would have his pick. We know that I think it was Solomon that had 1,000 wives and concubines altogether. And Solomon, that was a very small kingdom compared to all the way from Ethiopia to India. And so when the virgins were gathered together the second time, Mordecai sat in the king's gate. Esther had not showed her kindred nor her people, Esther didn't, as Mordecai had charged her, for Hadassah did the commandment of Mordecai, like as when she was brought up with him. And in those days, while Mordecai sat in the king's gate, listen to this, listen to what happened. See, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to see that even though the name of the Almighty is not here, we are seeing him work behind the scenes. We are seeing him weave the entire fabric of life together. And this is where we are in this day and time. We do not see everything he's doing. But we see even those who are elected in positions of responsibility in the government in the United States and Israel. All these things are done, and the Almighty is weaving his plan together. 4,000 years ago, the creator of the heavens and the earth made an everlasting covenant with Abraham. All the land from the Euphrates to the Nile belongs to the sons of Israel. And I will tell you, shockwaves are going to shake the earth as heaven reaches down to fulfill that promise. And every nation that stands against that promise, against that eternal covenant, will find themselves on the battlefield against the Almighty. That is why Jerusalem will be considered a burdensome stone for all nations, because this is what is coming up right now. And so listen to this. In those days, while Mordecai sat in the king's gate, two of the king's chamberlains, Bigthan and Teresh, those who kept the door, they were angry, and they sought to lay a hand on King Ahasuerus. And the thing was known to Mordecai, who told it unto Esther, the queen, and Esther then certified the king in Mordecai's name that Mordecai came and told me this, and when inquisition was made of the matter, it was found out. Therefore, they were both hanged on a tree, and it was written in the book of the Chronicles of the King. See, even the Babylonians do what is so seldom done in the Christian and Messianic world today. Diligent inquiry was made. Deuteronomy 19 tells us about this very thing. When someone brings an accusation against someone, then at that point, they bring both of the parties, are brought before the judges. And they make diligent inquiry. And if the person has made a false statement against the other, that which would have happened to the innocent party would then come upon the one making the false accusation. Unfortunately, no one, and especially as I've witnessed it in the Messianic world, even bothers reading the Torah on this. I hear there's leaders all over that repeat lies over and over, destroying people's lives. And they think they're some big Torah teacher and try to convince people that they're a big Torah teacher, but no, what they have done is they've negated it, and they're not even doing what Mordecai then instigated in Babylon. And what is that? That diligent inquiry is made, and then they hanged him, because they would have caused the death of the king, and now the death is coming upon them. Join us again next time as we then find out the arch enemy of Mordecai and how he got put in place. Where did he come from? Because the Almighty is weaving together all of history in order to effect his plan. Now I'd like to leave you with this blessing. Yivarechecha Yahovah v'yishmerecha. Yair Yahovah panav elecha v'chunecha. Yair Yahovah panav elecha v'yisem lecha shalom. B'shem Yeshua HaMashiach, Sar Shalom. Yahovah bless you and keep you. Yahovah make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. Yahovah lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. In the name of Yeshua, the Prince of Peace.
In his new teaching titled Shipwrecked, Michael Rood reveals the Apostle Paul's experience at sea as a metaphor for our journey in life and for our responsibility as believers to rescue those drowning in hopelessness.
Is a picture of the journey in life. We are on a ship. You are on a ship. You are on the ship. And there are so many people around who are drowning.
This teaching is not for sale and it's not on YouTube, but we'll send it to you as a thank you for your love gift donation of $50. Or donate $100 or more to get the teaching and a custom-made card game featuring the feasts of the Lord, plus a silver-plated menorah depicting the 12 tribes of Israel. Or for a gift of $300 or more, you'll receive everything plus a breathtaking silver-plated wine fountain. Get these gifts now while supplies last. Call the number on your screen or visit monthlylovegift.com.
Well, shalom Torah fans, and welcome back to Purim, the making of the King's Bride. Tonight, you want to put that gallows where? Well, tonight we are going into the third part of this five-part teaching on the Megillah of Hadassah, or the Scroll of Esther, or Easter, as she would be known in the English language. And tonight we're going to be in Easter, chapter 3, verse 1. And so please turn your Bibles there. Our whole story started out in the third year of Achashverosh. And it is at the end of a 6-month World's Fair in which there is a 7-day feast. At the culmination of this feast, this is when Vashti, which means absolutely gorgeous, beautiful, she is then asked by the emperor to be brought in with the royal crown in a display of the most magnificence of the empire, and she insults the emperor, which is not allowed to stand. In the whole course of events, we see that after she insults her husband, she is then put out from being the queen, and that pretty well ends the problem that we had with Vashti in the first chapter, but then the king is looking for a bride. We see that there's a young Jewish girl that is named Hadassah, that in the 6th year of the reign of Achashverosh, that is when she is then selected for the 1-year purification process, and with all the other young virgins in the empire, they are then brought in, they are groomed, they are trained, they are prepared for that 1 year. And at the end of that 1 year, that is when Achashverosh says, I found my queen, Hadassah. He only knew her as Easter, which is the name of the Babylonian goddess of fertility. But this is in secret. No one knew that she was actually Jewish. And so we see that her cousin, Mordecai, who had raised her, Mordecai, which means little, he's kind of in the background, kind of insignificant, little, but yet he was the one that raised her and said, don't let anyone know who your people are. Well, it was during the 7th year of the reign of Achashverosh, or shortly thereafter, that 2 of the doorkeepers in the emperor's palace are making a plot to kill the emperor. Mordecai finds out, relates the information to Easter, then she makes it known to her husband, and so this is circumvented, the men are executed, they are hung, and we now move into chapter 3, because we're going to see the hand of the Almighty is so prevalent in the book of Hadassah. He is moving things, yet his name is not mentioned. And Easter chapter 3 verse 1, after these things did King Achashverosh promote Haman, which means the magnificent, the son of Hammedatha, it says in your King James, but it is literally Ha-Meditha, the doubled. The king, the son of the doubled, the Agagite. And he advanced him and set his seat above all the princes that were with him. And so now this is after the time of Daniel, and as Daniel was a satrap, or the head under Darius, now we have under Xerxes, we have Haman, the magnificent one, who is an Agagite. And he is the one who is put in this position. Now, we are going to understand why there are all these boring genealogies in the Bible. They're not really boring at all. It's just that we have to know enough about the scriptures to know how important they are. And we see that to understand the relationship between Mordecai and Haman and what is about to happen between the Jew and this Agagite, we have to go back to Esther 2:5. It says, in Shushan the palace, there was a certain Jew whose name was Mordecai, the son of Yair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish. Now, it doesn't give us all the generations here. As a matter of fact, it leaves out like 480 years. But it lets us know that Mordecai, that it goes all the way back to being a son of Kish, which is over 490 years earlier, a Benjamite. Now, this shows that this is an unbroken lineage, even though it doesn't describe every single generation that is there. We also see this in the book of Matthew, where there are 14 generations from Abraham to David, 14 generations from David to the carrying away into Babylon, and 14 generations from the carrying away into Babylon under the Messiah. And we hear some of the anti-missionaries, Jewish anti-missionaries say, well, your scripture is not true because it doesn't have all the lineage there. No, of course it doesn't. It gives exactly 14 generations. It makes an internal Masorah between, in this pocket of generations, 14, 14, and 14, so that we see that it is unbroken. There is no question. And they have to admit that it is an unbroken lineage, but yet there are 3 kings that are left out from this lineage. Why? Because there is an internal Masorah being made of 14, 14, 14. It doesn't mean that there were only 14. It means it lists 14, and here are the names of these 14, so that when we get to Yeshua, we can find out that in the English and in the Greek text that they mistranslated a word that completely destroyed the lineage of Yeshua. In the Hebrew Matthew and also in the Aramaic, it is maintained. It's correct. But the Greeks mistranslated something. It was then worsened in the English versions of the Bible. And so no longer do you have 14, 14, 14. So I'm just saying that the standard that they use, oh, your Bible can't be true, the gospel lineage can't be true because there are 3 kings missing. Oh, we got 490 years of people that are missing from the lineage of Kish. And who's one of the sons of Kish? Saul, the first king of Israel. So we are looking, ladies and gentlemen, Mordecai, almost royalty. And as it tells in 2 Samuel 16:5 through 8, out of the family of the house of Saul, there came a man whose name is Shimei, the son of Gerah. This is Shaul, or King Saul's brother. And so we see that Mordecai literally comes from Saul's brother, who then has a son named Shimei, and that is the lineage of Mordecai. But we are still in the household of Saul, of the son of Kish. And so now I want to go back to this the storyline of Hadassah here, and to understand about this lineage of both Saul, the son of Kish, and this Agagite. In 1 Samuel 15:1, it says, Samuel said unto Saul, Thus saith Yehovah Tzevaot, I remembered that which Amalek did to Israel, how he laid in wait for him in the way when he came up from Egypt. Now go and smite Amalek, utterly destroy all that they have, spare them not, but slay both man and woman, infant, suckling, ox and sheep, camel and ass. And we covered this in our last session of exactly who the Amalekites were. But what I did not bring out was that who the Amalekites actually, what the offspring line is. Because we find this in Genesis. Turn to Genesis 36:12, and we see that Timnah was concubine to Eliphaz. Eliphaz was Esau's son. And Timnah bare to Eliphaz Amalek. And so Amalek is actually a grandson of Esau who went forth and dwelt with the cursed Canaanites, which they are known for their gross immorality, murdering, sex perversion. That's what they're known for. And that is why when we have these Amalekites dwelling with them, nothing good is going to come out of these Amalekites either. And so in 1 Samuel chapter 15, verses 7, we're going to continue reading. So Saul smote the Amalekites from Havilah till you come to Shur, that is over against Mitzrayim, or Egypt. But he took Agag. Now remember that Haman is an Agagite. His father is an Agagite. But he took Agag, the king of the Amalekites, alive, and the best of the sheep, the oxen, the fatlings, and the lambs, all that was good, and he would not utterly destroy them. And so Samuel then went back to Saul in verse 26 and says, Yehovah has rejected you from being king over Israel. Because he did not do what he was told to do. He was told to completely obliterate these people. But the best of the sheep, the best of the oxen, and Agag the king, and it's not just Agag the king, it's his family, okay? Because the Agagites are going to continue on. Okay, he's brought Agag, and it says that as Samuel turned about to go away, Shaul laid hold upon the skirt of his mantle. In the King James in the New Testament read the hem of his garment, but from the Hebrew it reads the skirt of his mantle. This is the tzitzit, grabbing onto the tzitzit on the hem of his garment, and it tore. It ripped it off. And Samuel said unto him, Yehovah hath rent the kingdom of Israel from you this day. It's over. And it was over. Because he made excuse after excuse, and finally the excuses ran out. This one thing, and just as the Almighty said in Exodus 17:16, Yahweh has sworn that he will make war with Amalek from generation to generation. See, this is why Saul was put on the job. You take him out now. I have sworn I will make war against them. Because of what they did, this will not be forgotten. Now they continue to do it. Now you take care of business. And because Saul refused to take care of business and he saved the best alive, now, hundreds of years later, in Babylon, the number one man in the empire under the king is the offspring of Agag, an Amalekite. Now we're going to see the plot thicken. Now we're in verse 2. And all the king's servants, this is back in Hadassah chapter 3, verse 1, all the king's servants that were in the king's gate, they bowed and reverenced His magnificence, Haman, for the king had commanded concerning him. He said that everyone will bow down and respect him. He's my number one man. He's on my right hand. You respect him like you respect me. But Mordecai, the little man, he refused to bow, nor did he give him any respect. Oh, we know what Haman felt like Rodney Dangerfield. He got absolutely no respect from the little man. Then the king's servants, which are in the king's gate, said unto Mordecai, why do you transgress the king's commandment? And now, in a verse, it's going to say that he told him he was a Jew, but, that's shorthand. He probably said, well, let me tell you a little story about this Agagite, about Haman, and about my great granduncle. Let me tell you what happened. And let me tell you what the Amalekites did to us when we were coming out of Egypt. let me give you the background. And so he told them the story. And then finally, they understood, but they said, it doesn't really matter. You're not living in the land of Israel. Your king didn't do his job, but now this man is in charge of the empire under Xerxes, under Ahasuerus. So it came to pass, in verse 4, when they spoke daily unto him, and he hearkened not unto them, then they told Haman to see whether Mordecai's matter would stand, because he told them, Mordecai told him that he was a Jew and gave him the background. And when Haman saw that Mordecai did not bow nor reverence him, and it's like bowing down and reverencing Arafat, or bowing down and negotiating with Hezbollah. Now, they don't quite pronounce it like that on the news, but these are the murdering followers of Allah, the fictitious moon god invented by Muhammad, okay? Or Hamas, the destroyers, okay? No respect. No respect. And he thought evil to lay hands on Mordecai alone. But when they, the king's servants, which were in the king's gate, had shown him the people of Mordecai, Haman sought to destroy all the Jews. He said, I'm not just going to take out Mordecai, I'm going to kill them all. Because now he knows these are the people that nearly wiped them out. These are the people that my ancestors, because listen, 127 provinces, 127 kingdoms. This is the top of the kingdom of what's left of the Amalekites, and now he's sitting at the top of the empire of the Persian Empire. So he just sought to destroy all the Jews that were throughout the entire kingdom of Ahasuerus, even all the people of Mordecai. So in the first month, that is the month Nisan. Now really, the month is not named Nisan until right here, right now. Once we are in Babylon, then we are picking up the Babylonian names of these months. But the first month is the month of the Aviv. Now in your King James Version, it'll say the month of Abib. Okay, I don't care whether you pronounce it with the vet or the bet. It really doesn't matter. Jews today pronounce it with the vet. Okay, Aviv, but it is always Ha-Aviv. There is no month called Abib or a month called Abib. No, it's the month of the Aviv, and it begs the question: the Aviv what? Because Aviv is an ancient Hebrew agricultural term that describes the maturity of the crop known as barley. It only refers to barley. And we find out that when the barley is Aviv, that is when we celebrate the Feast of Unleavened Bread, because during the Feast of Unleavened Bread, we present the first fruits of the barley harvest. And the barley must be Aviv before you can present the first fruits, and that's why we have to occasionally add on a 13th month in order to allow the barley to mature. That's why each year we do not know when Passover is going to be until the end of the 12th month. The first sliver of the new moon appears, and if the barley is Aviv, then we celebrate Passover that month. If not, then we put it off for a month. But now, it is the month of Nisan, as it's known in Babylon, in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus. So now Hadassah has been queen now for 5 years. And that is the month that they cast Pur. That is the lot. So there was a lot that they cast. This is kind of a way of choosing. You know, you can do a 3-man way, and that's, what's that? Stone and paper and scissors. Okay, this is a way that some people cast lots. But it says that they cast Pur, that is a lot, before Haman from day to day, from month to month, to the 12th month. That is the month of Dar. Now, let's just take a look at this. Let's use the simplest way for deciding something. This is how they start out NFL games, with the simplest possible way of figuring out who is going to kick off and who's going to receive which end of the field that they commence play from. They use a simple coin toss. And if we start right now at the first month, and then we are going to start, and we flip a coin, which is the simplest way. And we flip that coin because we're just looking for heads to come up once. The first time heads come up, boom, that's the month that we are going to put in place a plan. And what the plan is to exterminate all the Jews. That's what it is. And so, it comes up. For the first 6 months, the first 6 times, they flip the coin. First 6 times, it's never heads. The chance of that happening is 1 in 10.67. And, you know, and every month they flip it and it doesn't come up, they're starting to think, you know, something's wrong with this coin. Now, this is the simplest thing. If it's doubled, if it's like 2 things that have to come up together at the same time, black and white, and both of them have to come up at the same time, then the odds significantly multiply exponentially from there. But let's just do the simplest thing, because this is showing that the hand of the Almighty is working in this very thing. In the whole history of time, we are going to see that actually things in the book of Daniel are going to be based upon the events of Purim, and it's all back in the days of Haman, a simple coin toss. And so now, he finally gets to the 11th month, and for the first time, it comes up heads. The chances is 1 in 186.2 times. It's showing us the hand of the Almighty is in here because it's going all the way around the year to the final month. This is going to give the greatest amount of time for all these things to transpire. And now, we found the month, and now it's going to be flipped. The lot is going to be cast. And again, we don't know exactly how the lot is done. I'm giving you just the simplest version, a coin toss. And now it's on the 13th. And so on the 13th, it's 1 in 620.5 chances, 1 in 620.5 that it wouldn't come up heads until the 13th day. And so now, we are hopefully, either at the end of this segment or next segment, we're going to get into Daniel's sealed prophecies, because the Almighty is in charge of the coin toss. Worst case scenario, that this will have to end up being one of the DVDs to our Ambassador Club members out there. But let's go on. In verse 8, and Haman said unto Achashverosh, there's a certain people scattered abroad, dispersed among the people in all the provinces of thy kingdom, and their laws are diverse from all people, neither they keep the king's law. Therefore it's not for the king's profit to suffer them. You know, the guy's just a liar, okay? You know, the Jews in the land have been nothing but good for the entire empire. And he said, oh, these people, they don't respect your laws. Why? Because they live on a higher level. You know, it's like John Adams. Or excuse me, Samuel Adams. Who said that we're not basing the future of America upon the Constitution. Far from it, we're basing it upon every man's ability to govern himself according to the commandments of God. Because if you govern yourself according to the commandments of God, you are living on a higher level. You don't need to make laws for these people. Now we have 2.4 million laws in America. Why? People simply will not govern themselves according to the Torah of God. No. You know, we've been taught in our schools that there is no God. It's survival of the fittest. If it feels good, do it. Oh, this is post-Christian America. If you people have not heard yet, oh yes, our president has announced it. This is no longer just a Christian country. You know, we've got all sorts of twisted religious perversion out there that is now acceptable, okay? I mean, you know, even cults that call for the murder of everyone that's not in them. That's now acceptable. Oh, that's actually a very revered religion in America. No one dares say anything about this sick, twisted, murdering religion because the president's in bed and bows down to their leaders. Okay? In bed with them, that's a figure of speech. Okay? But now, we take a look at this, and he's just lying. Haman's a liar. There is no honor in this magnificent person at all. Not a bit of honor is due him, and that's why Mordecai refuses to even look his way. He wouldn't even spit his way if he had to go out of his way. Therefore, it's not the king's profit to allow them to continue. If it please the king, let it be written that they may be destroyed, and this is what I'll do. I'll pay 10,000 talents of silver into the hands of those that have the charge of the business to bring it into the king's treasuries. You know, a typical Washington, D.C. payoff. That's why, actually, there's one state that doesn't have to go under Obamacare, because the deal was made with the senator, if he would sign the bill, that his state would be exempt, because they couldn't do it honestly. It's a multi-million-dollar payoff, ladies and gentlemen. See, these things are real. He's paying off the king. He's putting so much into the king's coffers. And the king then, saying he was serious, took the ring off his right hand, which is the signet ring, and he gave it to Haman, the son of the doubled, the Agagite, the Jews' enemy. And the king said unto Haman, the silver, it's yours. The people also, do with them as it seems good to thee, because it's going to take some finances to pull this whole thing off. And he says, okay, all the money that you've given, I'm going to give you charge of it. You make sure that this is done. I believe that you're telling me the truth. We need to take care of these Jews. We've got the United Nations. Everything is backing you right now. 127 provinces, all on your side. And then were the king's scribes called on the 13th day of the first month, and there was written according to all that Haman had commanded unto the king's lieutenants, to the governors, and to every that were in every province, to the rulers of the people of every kingdom according to the writing thereof, and to every people after their language, in the name of the king. It was written and sealed with the king's ring, because the king's ring was on the finger of the magnificent Haman. And letters were sent by post to all the king's provinces to destroy, to kill, to cause to perish all Jews, young and old, little children and women, in one day, even upon the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, and to take the spoils of your prey. And this is what we see in the Europe's version of this, Hitler's version of it, in the Museum of the Extinct Race, the great film out there, documentary, The Rape of Europa, to see exactly what was done, the absolute murder of millions and millions of Jews, the plundering of everything that they had, and this was what the plan was back then. So the copy of the writing for a command was given in every province to be published unto all the people, that they should be ready against that day. So the post went out, being hastened by the king's commandment, and the decree was given in Shushan, the palace. And the king and Haman sat down to drink some Courvoisier XO cognac, but the city of Shushan was in absolute turmoil. And when, chapter 4, verse 1, when Mordecai perceived all that was done, he rent his clothes, he put on sackcloth and ashes, and went out into the midst of the city and cried out with a loud and a bitter cry. And you could imagine the torment in his soul, because he knows that he's responsible. He could have just kept his mouth shut, so to speak, and bowed to Haman like everyone else and pretended that everything was okay. But no, he spoke up. And now they are going to not only kill him, but they're going to kill every living Jew in the empire, which means the world would be Judenrein. There would be no Jews left. This is exactly the position of Hamas and Hezbollah. This is their position now. It is illegal to enter into the king's gate where Mordecai was allowed to go because of his position, but it was illegal to go in clothed in sackcloth and ashes. So Mordecai stayed outside, and the entire empire, wherever this decree went, everyone, all the Jews were in great mourning. They were fasting and weeping and wailing, and many lay in sackcloth and ashes. They had 1 year left before the death sentence would be executed, and there was nothing they could do about it. They were unarmed. They were living in the civilian population of the empire of Babylon. So Esther's maids and her chamberlains came and told her the situation with Mordecai, that he's out there, your cousin is out there in sackcloth and ashes outside of the king's gate. Then the queen was exceedingly grieved. This does not look good politically. And she sent raiment to clothe him and to take away his sackcloth from him, but he received them not. Then Esther called Hatak, which means truth, one of the king's chamberlains, whom he had appointed to attend her, and gave him a commandment to Mordecai to know what it was and why it was. What is going on here? So Hatak went forth to Mordecai unto the street of the city, which was before the king's gate, and Mordecai told him all that had happened unto him, the sum of money that Haman had promised to pay the king's treasurers to destroy the Jews. Also, Mordecai gave Hatak a copy of the writing of the decree that was given to Shushan to destroy them, to show it to Esther, and to declare to her and charge her that she should go unto the king to make supplication unto him, and to request before him for all her people. And Hatak came and told Esther the words of Mordecai. Again, Esther spoke unto Hatak and gave commandment unto Mordecai. All the king's servants, the people of the province, everybody knows that whoever, whether man or woman, whoever shall come unto the king into the inner court who is not called, there is just one law. You put him to death, except to whom the king shall hold forth the golden scepter, that he may live. But I've not been called to come into the king these 30 days. Well, Hadassah's now been queen for 5 years. She may be a little past her prime, and he's got, perhaps thousands of concubines. And so, she's not first on the list here for the last 30 days. And they told Mordecai Esther's words. Then Mordecai commanded, okay, you tell my cousin this. Do not think that you will escape because you're in the king's house more than all the Jews. For if you hold your peace at this time, there shall be an enlargement. There shall be a greatness and deliverance arise to the Jews from some other place. But you and your father's house will be destroyed. And who knows whether you have come into the kingdom, that everything that has happened to you in your whole life, your parents being killed, me raising you, me then helping you, and you getting into the king's house, and now that you are the queen, how do you know that all this didn't happen? That Vashti didn't refuse to come in before the king and all this stuff, that the whole fabric of life wasn't so that this moment was divinely designed by the Almighty, that all this happened, that you would be in the king's palace for such a time as this. Then Esther bade them return to Mordecai this answer. Go gather all the Jews that are present in Shushan. Fast for me. Do not eat and do not drink for 3 days, day or night. I also and my maidens will fast likewise, and so will I go unto the king, which is against the law. If I perish, I perish. If I die, I die. So Mordecai went his way and did according to all that Esther had commanded him. Chapter 5. Now it came to pass on the 3rd day that Esther put on her royal apparel and stood in the inner court of the king's house, over against the king's house, and the king sat upon his royal throne in the royal house, over against the gate of the house. And it was so, when the king saw Esther, the queen, standing in the court, that she obtained favor in his sight. And the king held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. So Esther drew near and touched the top of the scepter. Then the king said unto her, and I'm sure she was like, whew. This is after 3 days of no eating and no drinking. Her life is on the line. And he said, come, dear. Then the king said, what wilt thou, Queen Esther? What is your request? It shall be given unto thee, even to the half of the kingdom. And she said, well, that sounds like a pretty good divorce settlement. That's, 63.5 empires, kingdoms. I'll take that. No, it's a figure of speech. It is a magnanimous offer of royalty, even to the half of my kingdom. Do you think he would really give the half of his kingdom if she said it? No, there's no way on God's green earth. This is just royal fluff. Then said the king unto her, what wilt thou? Unto the half of my kingdom? And Esther answered in verse 4, if it seem good to the king, let the king and Haman come this day unto the banquet that I have prepared for him. And the king said, cause Haman to make haste, that he may do as Esther has said. He said, yes, dear, we'll be at your banquet. So the king and Haman came to the banquet that Esther had prepared, just the two of them. Now, what does she know? We don't know what she knows because she's been praying and fasting. And we know that you're going to watch divine revelation unfold here. You want to know how to walk by the Spirit? Read the book of Esther. And the king said unto Esther at the wine and cheese party, it says a banquet of wine, what is your petition? And what will be granted thee? What is your request? Even to the half of my kingdom, and it shall be performed. Anything you want, sweetheart, it's yours. Just ask. Just say the word. Here's a blank check. Just fill it out. I'll sign it. No problem. What do you want? Then Esther answered and said, my petition and request is, if I found favor in your sight, and if it please the king to grant my petition and to perform my request, let the king and Haman come to the banquet that I shall prepare for them, and I will do tomorrow as the king has said. See, now this is what Shaul in the Brit Hadashah in 1 Corinthians refers to as word of knowledge and word of wisdom. One of the, these are two of the manifestations of the Spirit. See, when the Spirit gives information, whereby you could not know it by the senses realm, this is what we put in the category of revelation, divine revelation. But see, she doesn't tell the king what the revelation is. See, she gets the revelation. This is word of knowledge. It is a word. It's okay, this is what you do. And the word of wisdom is how to carry it out. She doesn't tell the king. She tells nobody. It's information for her alone to act on, and if she does it right, then we're going to see the result. Then went Haman forth that day, joyful and with a glad heart. He has just been invited. It's only the emperor and only him. It's like he walks out, he's at the top of his game. He walks out, oh, what a beautiful morning. Oh, what a beautiful day. I've got a wonderful feeling. Everything's going my. And then there's Mordecai. Mordecai, this dude, this disrespectful jerk, the man who gives me no respect. I can't stand this man. As soon as he walks out, he saw Mordecai in the king's gate. He didn't stand up. He didn't move for him. He was full of indignation. Nevertheless, he restrained himself. He wanted to strike out. He wanted to take out his scimitar and strike him down right then, but he's holding it back. And when he came home, he called for his friends. And he called Zeresh, his wife. Zeresh is Persian for Goldie. So from now on, we're just going to call her Goldie, okay? So he called his friends and called Goldie, and Haman told him of the glory of his riches, his magnificence. That's why my name is the Magnificent One. I am Haman the Magnificent. Everybody bows down to me. I am the top one in the entire empire. Look at all my children and all the things that the king has promoted me. He showed him his ribbons, his badges, his notoriety, his honor that he had received. And he had been advanced among all the princes and servants of the king, in verse 12. And Haman said, yes, even Esther the queen, let no man come in with the king unto the banquet except me, myself. There is nobody greater. I am the greatest. And tomorrow I'm invited also unto her with the king, and no one else is coming. Yet all this avails me nothing as long as I see Mordecai, this Jew, sitting in the king's gate. Then said Goldie, his wife, and all his friends, let a gallows be made 50 cubits high, and tomorrow speak unto the king that Mordecai may be hanged thereon. Then go thou in merrily with the king unto the banquet. And the thing pleased Haman, and he caused the gallows to be made. Now, when reading this, first of all, the first thing you have to do is get out of your mind that the word gallows is some kind of place where a 13-knotted hangman's noose from the Old West is positioned on this beam with the trap door, and that this whole thing, apparatus, is up 50 feet high, and that Haman is going to then hang Mordecai around the neck. The word gallows here in Hebrew is simply the word wood. He caused the wood to be made. A wood 50 feet high. Now, let's go back to Genesis for just a moment. Genesis 40:22, it says that Pharaoh hanged the chief baker as Joseph had interpreted to them. Remember, in the prison, there was a butler and a baker, and the butler, the one that gave the wine into the king's hand, was restored to his position, but the baker said that in 3 days you're going to be hanged. Well, what does that mean? It doesn't mean hanged with a hangman's noose. No, hanging in Egypt, as in, and this was part of Egypt now. You know, this is much, much later. But remember, from Ethiopia to the Indus River, all the way to Greece, this is what they did. They had wood that was sharpened, and they hung people on this sharpened wood that came up to a slender point, and people were then hung on it. Now, how were they hung on? Let's continue on. In Joshua chapter 10, verse 26, we read, Joshua smote them, slew them, and then hanged them on 5 trees. And they were hanging upon trees until the evening. Now, the word trees, as soon as you see this in your mind, you have a picture of regular trees. But it's the word eitz. And you just look it up in a Strong's Concordance, which is really one of the most simple, even elementary. It's elementary. It's not even high school, okay? A Strong's Concordance is an elementary concordance. It's among the simplest concordances you can get. And even there, it says tree, wood, timber, stock, plank, stalk, stick, gallows. And when the word gallows comes up, it is referring to an impaling stake. They killed these people and then hung their dead bodies on these impaling stakes for all to see. In Ezra 6:11, it says, I've made a decree that whosoever shall alter this word, let timber be pulled down from his house, and being set up, let them be hanged thereon, and let his house be a dunghill for this very thing. Whoever alters this word, let timber be pulled down from their house. and let them be hanged on it. How do you hang people on timber pulled down from their house? You build a gallows or an impaling stake, and then you impale these people on the stake. And then let their house be a dunghill. And what do? All the openings they close up. The second story they open up, and then burrow down, make a hole in the second floor, down into the bottom, and that becomes literally the dunghill, or for that village, it's the public latrine. This is what will be done to their house. If this is what's done to your house, ladies and gentlemen, this is the ultimate disgrace for your family. You know, that means pretty much your family's been completely destroyed, and everyone's memory of you is, oh yeah, that's the Jacob's latrine that you have heard about. You know, the Jacob's latrine? Oh yes, the ones that used to work for the king? Oh yes, the old Jacob's latrine. Okay. Now we understand, make his house a dunghill. Now to understand this, this impaling, because see, for the timber to be then set up into a paling stake 50 feet high, it is Herodotus that said that Darius, the father of Xerxes, hung over 3,000 Babylonians when he took the city. He impaled them. He didn't hang them on hangman's noose. He said that he impaled them. Now, how is this generally done? Well, if you really want to exhibit some excruciating pain, you don't impale the people first. First of all, you arrest them. Then, like his design for Mordecai, is to then tie his hands behind his back. And then, upon this scaffolding, they would then go up and then they would seat this person on this sharpened impaling stake. Seat him on a needlepoint impaling stake that then gets bigger and bigger as it expands out. Even if his hands were not tied, a man seated on an impaling stake would be in such excruciating pain for hours. And it doesn't matter how strong you are to reach underneath you and to try to pry yourself off from an impaling stake 50 feet high to where everyone sees you. This is an example to the whole world. This is what happens to the enemies of Haman. At 50 cubits, this is like 75 feet tall. This is twice as tall as a telephone pole. So imagine a city street telephone pole sharpened to a needle point, and then finally broadening out to about this big at 5 feet down. You would hope you would die in the first 5 or 6 hours. But every time you moved, every muscle twitch, every relaxation, everything that you did, that point would go deeper and deeper and deeper. And if it missed your heart and then took out one of your lungs and then went up into your throat and finally your brain. Whew, man. You want to put that gallows where? Ladies and gentlemen, give me a 13-knotted hangman's noose from the Old West any day. Do not let me die on the gallows of Haman. Well, this brings us into the Brit Hadashah, in fact. I want you to go to 1 Samuel chapter 31, verse 3, because this gives us an idea of what it means when it says that these people would be hanged. Joshua hung them on these trees, on these impaling stakes, that let timber be brought, let their house be assembled, take the roof off, make this a public latrine, and then the roof timbers, sharpen them, and then impale these people on them if they break the Torah. You know, he's getting serious now in Ezra. You know, these people have got to get back in line. And so it says that the battle went sore in 1 Samuel chapter 31, verse 3. The battle went sore against Saul, and the archers hit him, and he was gravely wounded by the archers. Sore wounded, it's more than just sore. I mean, this means gravely. He was wounded unto death. Then said Saul unto his armor-bearer, draw your sword, thrust me through therewith, lest these uncircumcised come and thrust me through and abuse me. But his armor-bearer would not, for he was deathly afraid. Therefore Saul took a sword, fell upon it, and that is when Saul hanged himself. He hung himself on his sword. And when his armor-bearer saw that Saul was dead, he likewise fell upon his sword and died with him. So Saul died, and his 3 sons, and his armor-bearer, and all his men that same day. They all died together. Now, I want to take you into the book of Acts. Acts chapter 10, verse 39, and it says, and we are all witnesses of these things which he did, Yeshua did, both in the land of the Jews and in Jerusalem, whom they slew and hanged on a tree. Now we come into Roman times, ladies and gentlemen. They slew him, they hung him on a tree. And this tree is a Zulon. In your Strong's Concordance, number 3586. And whenever people use Strong Concordance numbers, it drives me nuts. So I just did it. Because Strong's numbers are not the Bible. It goes Strong's number this, that. No. They quote it like it's some big authority. It's the juvenile version of a concordance, okay? But wood, that which has been made from wood. 1A1, as a beam from which one is suspended. A gibbet, a cross. Now we know that Yeshua was hanged on a tree. Was he impaled on a gallows? No, because now we are in Roman times. They don't impale people, they hang them on a cross. Let's go into this. In John 19:31, therefore the Jews, because it was a preparation so that the bodies would not remain upon the cross on the Sabbath day, for that Sabbath was a high day, they besought Pilate that their legs might be broken and that they might be taken away, because it was the preparation. The preparation to what? Well, it's the preparation of the Passover, and this is what it tells us in the same chapter, in verse 14 of John 19, it was a preparation of the Passover about the 6th hour. Pilate said unto the Jews, behold your king. It's the preparation of Passover. Now this word cross is the word in Greek stauros. And stauros, according to Strong's, number 1 is an upright stake, especially a pointed one. It could be an impaling stake. Was Yeshua impaled on a stake? It gave us a description of it. He was nailed to a stauros. Number 2, a cross. Why would they use the word stauros, which could also be cross? Because this is what the Romans did. They worshiped Mithra. The sign of Mithra was the Babylonian T or Tau for the cross of Mithra, or the cross of Tammuz. Tammuz, the Babylonian Tau. A well-known instrument of the most cruel and ignominious punishment borrowed by the Greeks and Romans from the Phoenicians, to were fixed among the Romans down to the time of Constantine the Great, the guiltiest criminals, particularly the basest slaves. This is Strong's his description here. So you see that one place it says that he was hanged on a tree. And so now, we use this one example. Okay, well, Jesus, it was a growing tree, and Jesus was actually on a growing tree. That's one usage of it. You've got to look at the culture, people. Josephus said at one time they had 2,000 Jewish men in chains waiting for the next cross to become available, because it took up to a week to die on a cross. And so now this person dies, they hang the next one. They knew what a cross was. You can't turn it into a tree. You can't turn it into a gallows at this particular point. And then, now we read in Matthew 27:5. Judas cast down the pieces of silver in the temple and departed and went and hanged himself. Now, what does this mean? Does it mean that he built a gallows, like in the Old West, got a 13-knotted hangman's noose, and hanged himself? No. We've got to go with what is going on. What is the culture? Acts 1:18 says, Judas, and this is Peter, Kepha, give us a detail. Judas purchased a field with the reward of iniquity. And falling headlong, he burst asunder in the midst, and all his bowels gushed out, and it became known in all of Jerusalem as a gross hematos, or akeldama, or the field of blood. It was a bloody, gory mess. Now, how could that happen if he was hung by an Old West 13-knotted hangman's noose? It wouldn't. How did he hang himself? He took his sword, he put the hilt on the ground, just like King Saul did, and he hung himself on his sword. He impaled himself on his sword. Remember the night of the Last Supper? Yeshua asked his disciples if they ever lacked anything during the time he sent them out in ministry. They said no. He said, okay, I'm telling you, if you got a coat, extra coat, sell it. If you got money, go out and buy yourself a sword. Now, go, do. Of course, no, it wasn't the Last Supper, wasn't the Passover meal. He just sent his disciples to go out and buy swords, or to sell something at Aaron's Park and Pawn and buy a sword. And Peter said, well, we've got two here already. Judas may have been one of them. And they said, that's enough. We're not trying to take over the world here. Two's enough. But Judas took his sword and he impaled himself on it. And all of his bowels gushed out. And it was well known in Jerusalem, that place was known as the field of blood. See, ladies and gentlemen, the words in your English version of the Bible had to be interpreted in light of their biblical usage, not just at the time of translation, but in their historical usage as well. All these things must be understood in order for us to get the proper context. And now we see in ancient Persia, under the reign of Ahasuerus, Xerxes, that Haman and Agagite, the enemy of the Jews from the moment we walked out of Egypt, these murderers are now trying to murder us again and to wipe us all out, and the first one that has got to go. He is not going to be satisfied until a 75-foot tower with a pointed beam, and he has Mordecai, the Jew, seated upon it with that gallows protruding up, inch by inch, hour after hour. Now we're going to find out if one of the most powerful, one of the wealthiest men in the world, one who has the signet ring and can make anything happen in the Novus Ordo Seclorum, the new world order of Xerxes, is going to have his way with a little Jew. Now I would like to leave you with this blessing. Yivarechecha Yehovah v'yishmerecha. Yair Yehovah panav elecha v'yichunecha. Yisa Yehovah panav elecha v'yisem lecha shalom. B'Shem Yeshua, Sar Shalom. Yehovah bless you and keep you. Yehovah make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. Yehovah lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace in the name of Yeshua.
In his new teaching titled Shipwrecked, Michael Rood reveals the Apostle Paul's experience at sea as a metaphor for our journey in life and for our responsibility as believers to rescue those drowning in hopelessness.
Is a picture of the journey in life. We are on a ship. You are on a ship. You are on the ship. And there are so many people around who are drowning.
This teaching is not for sale and it's not on YouTube, but we'll send it to you as a thank you for your love gift donation of $50. Or donate $100 or more to get the teaching and a custom-made card game featuring the feasts of the Lord, plus a silver-plated menorah depicting the 12 tribes of Israel. Or for a gift of $300 or more, you'll receive everything plus a breathtaking silver-plated wine fountain. Get these gifts now while supplies last. Call the number on your screen or visit monthlylovegift.com.
Way too late. The name of the Almighty is relevantly absent from the scroll of Easter. When we are surrounded by pagans in the everyday non-miraculous world, when it looks like we are all alone, and our search for the meaning and divine purpose of our life seems unfruitful, even when there appears to be no hope in surviving the plans of the enemy to exterminate and enslave the children of the Most High in their new world orders, He is there, and He is not silent. In the scroll, the Megillah of Hadassah, or Easter, as she was known after she went in to be the bride of the king, we read in the very first chapter that after a 6-month world fair, then there is a 7-day elegant feast. And at the end of that feast, the king asks the queen to then come before everyone in the culminating event of the entire 6-month event. Vashti, the queen, disrespects the king, and so Vashti is vanquished. 3 years later, a global beauty contest is held, and after 1 year of preparation, then these young maidens are brought in before the king. And the one that the king desires, she will be the queen. It just so happens that a Jewish girl wins. And it just so happens that this Jewish girl, who has a cousin named Mordecai, happens to overhear of a conspiracy to assassinate the king, and he tells Queen Esther. Later, Haman, an Amalekite, now called Palestinian by the United Nations, is elevated to second in command and initiates a pogrom to exterminate all the Jews in a single day. He casts lots, Purim, casts lots, and it is going to be decided by blind chance the very day in which the Jews, helpless in the vice of fate, are going to be exterminated in one day. It just so happens that that date falls on the last month of the entire year. Well, just a couple of months later, the queen risks her life to make an appeal to the king. She does the right thing regardless of personal risk to herself. And at that audience with the king, instead of her being put to death for her presumptuousness, instead the king holds out the golden scepter and accepts her, and she makes a request to the king. And this request is that the king and Haman attend a wine banquet that she has prepared for them that day. At the wine banquet, the king then asks her, "What will you have? I will give you anything, even to the half of my kingdom." And she says, "Well, if you really will honor my request, then I ask that you come again tomorrow and to the banquet that I have prepared, and that day I will make my request known." Well, it just so happens that that afternoon, as Haman walks out of the banquet, being honored by the queen and the only one in attendance other than the king, Haman sees that Mordecai does not respect him. And so he goes home and builds a stake 75 feet high to publicly impale Mordecai. Well, just so happens that that night the king cannot sleep. And so he calls for the book of records. If anything's going to put him to sleep, it's going to be the book of records. And it just so happens that the book of records opens to the foiled conspiracy and the hero of this conspiracy to kill the king, which is Mordecai. Well, it just so happens that the next morning, Haman approaches the king to ask permission to impale Mordecai on his 75-foot gallows or impaling stake. But just before he opens his mouth, then the king says what should be done unto the one that the king desires to honor. And Haman, thinking that, oh, who would he want to honor more than me, comes up with the most elaborate plan, the most grandiose idea that anyone's ever thought of how to honor the person that the king desires to honor, thinking it's going to be him. Well, to his surprise, it just so happens that Haman is ordered to publicly honor Mordecai. Well, that afternoon at the second banquet, the chain of events will prove to all, and it will forever be remembered. In fact, a proclamation is going to be made at the end of this entire record that it will be forever remembered that he is there and he is not silent. Please open the Megillah of Easter to chapter 7, and we begin reading. Hadassah, or Easter, chapter 7, verse 1. So the king and Haman came to the banquet with Easter the queen. Now, just before this happens, when Mordecai is honored by Haman, Haman then immediately goes back and tells his friends, he tells his wife what had happened, and they say, you know, surely, they prophesied, surely you are going to fall before this man. And he is just absolutely wrenched with grief over the entire turn of events that have happened, that have all come upon him. He is the second in command of the entire empire, and his word is law. And yet Mordecai refuses to bow to him. Now he's had to honor Mordecai, and now he goes back and tells his family, and his family is saying, you're in big trouble. And right while this is being said to him, then the emissaries of the king come and to hasten him to bring him to the banquet. So the king and Haman came to the banquet with Easter the queen. And the king said unto Easter the second day at the banquet of wine, what is your petition, Queen Esther? And it shall be given to thee. What is your request? It shall be performed even to the half of the kingdom. And the queen answered and said, if I have found favor in thy sight, O king, and if it please the king, let my life be given to me at my petition, and my people at my request. For we have been sold, both I and my people, to be destroyed, to be slain, and to utterly perish. But if we just been sold for slaves, for bondmen and bondwomen, I would have held my tongue. Although the enemy could not countervail the king's damage, it would damage the entire empire. But if we were only sold as slaves, I wouldn't have said anything about it. Then the king, Ahasuerus, answered and said unto Esther the queen, who is he? Where is he? Who dares to presume in his heart to do this wicked, vile, disgusting thing, to take away my queen and Mordecai that I have just honored this very day? I have given him the greatest honor in the empire. Who is the one who has done this? Who has done this? And Easter said, that adversary and enemy is this wicked Haman! Then Haman was afraid before the king and queen. And the king, arising from the banquet of wine in his wrath, went out into the garden palace. And Haman stood up to make a request for his life to Esther, the queen. For he saw that there was evil determined against her by the king. Then the king returned out of the palace garden after having given this some thought. And as he returned into the place of the banquet of wine, Haman had fallen upon the bed where Hadassah, Esther, was. Then the king said, well, is he going to rape the queen right in front of me, right in my own house? And just as the word went out of the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. It's over. It's done. And Harbona, one of the chamberlains, said before the king, behold, look, you can see it from here. A gallows 50 cubits high, 20.62 inches. It is 75 feet high, which Haman had made for Mordecai. Mordecai, you know, the one that spoke good for the king, the one that stood up and exposed this conspiracy where they planned on killing you. This is the gallows, the impaling stake that stands in the house of Haman. Then the king said, hang him thereon, impale him. But I don't want you to just put him on top and set him on top. I want it to be slow this time. I want you to set him on top of that sharpened stake, 75 feet tall, in front of everyone where they can see this. And I want it to be slow. Don't set him down too hard. I want this to last for hours. So they impaled Haman on the impaling stake, on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Then the king's wrath was pacified. Just so happened, people, he is there, and he is not silent. Chapter 8, verse 1, on that day did the king Ahasuerus give the house of Haman, the Jews' enemy, unto Esther, the queen. The house, everything that he owned, all of his wealth, all of his servants, everything that was left, it all belonged to the queen, and it was in her hands. And Mordecai came before the king, for Esther had told what he was to her. This is my cousin Mordecai. He brought me up when my father and my mother died. He was the one that brought me up from a youth. And the king took off his signet ring, which he had taken from Haman, and he gave it to Mordecai. Now, Mordecai, which means little, insignificant, nothing of great stature, Mordecai was then set over the house of Haman by Esther, his cousin, gave him the house of Haman, all of his wealth, everything that he had. Esther, Hadassah, his cousin, didn't need it, and he now has the signet ring, and he is elevated to the number 2 command in the entire empire. And it says in verse 3, and Esther spake again before the king, and fell down at his feet, and besought him with tears to put away the devices of Haman, the Agagite, which means is of the royal line of Agag, who is an Amalekite, and his device which he devised against the Jews. Then the king held out the golden scepter to Hadassah, and she arose and stood before the queen. So she was back off at the time. She was pleading in tears before him. And this is the thing. We learn in the early chapters and from history that you do not go before the king and the emperor in a condition of being sad. He doesn't need your problems, okay? He's got his own problems in running the empire. And if a butler or a wine taster like Nehemiah coming before him and is a sad countenance, we see that Nehemiah was afraid because the king saw that he was of sad countenance, and it's not the king's job to take care of everyone's personal problems. That's the job of the chaplain. He said, go see the chaplain. Sounds like a personal problem to me. I don't need your personal problems. And so Nehemiah was afraid when he went in, and the king said, you're sad. Because he could lose not only his job, he could lose his head over this thing. The queen is crying, weeping at his feet, and he could have her executed for it again. But instead, he holds out the golden scepter, and she comes toward the king and stands before him. Verse 5, and said, if it please the king, if I have found favor in your sight, and the thing seems good before the king, and if I be pleasing in his eyes, let it be written to reverse the letters devised by Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, which he wrote to destroy the Jews which are in all the king's provinces. Now, this commandment that was written, signed by the seal, the signet ring of the king, and so it has the authority of the king, and it is now the law of the Medes and Persians. It cannot be changed. Nobody can change it. The king can't even change it. Even though it was maliciously done, yet he has nothing he can do to change it. And now it's gone into all the provinces that on the 13th month of the day of the month of Adar, the 13th day of the 12th month, that is when everyone is going to be, all the Jews are going to be executed. Now we're in verse 6. How can I endure to see the evil that shall come unto my people? How can I endure to see the destruction of my kindred? Then the king said unto Esther the queen and to Mordecai, look, behold, I have given Esther the house of Haman, and they have impaled him on his gallows because he desired to lay his hands on the Jews. Write also for the Jews as elects you, in the king's name, seal it with the king's signet ring, for the writing which is written in the king's name and sealed with the king's ring, no man can reverse. Then were the king's scribes called. The king invites the scribes in. We're in verse 9 of chapter 8 here. And the king's scribes called at that time, it was the third month. That is the month of Sivan, on the 23rd day. And it was written according to all that Mordecai commanded unto the Jews, and to the lieutenants, and the deputies and rulers of the provinces, which were in India unto Ethiopia, even 127 provinces, 127 kingdoms in his realm. From Ethiopia to the Indus River in India, it's all his, all the way to, is it Sardis? That the Greeks came and burned, I believe it was Sardis, and that's what set Xerxes on the warpath against the Greeks. So all of this land, 127 empires. Okay? And it said, write into them in their language, and to the Jews according to their writing. And so now he's writing in the script that the Jews will understand. And we do not know at this point if this is still the Paleo-Hebrew or the modern-day Babylonian Hebrew that is done at this particular point in time. It could very well still be what we call a Paleo-Hebrew at this time. But in fact, there's no difference between Paleo-Hebrew and the modern Jewish script, except for the pictographs of the ancient Paleo-Hebrew. It is, if you take the Hebrew text, just in a Bible program, the Hebrew text, and you paste it in a Word document, and then you change the font to Paleo-Hebrew, it's a one-to-one conversion. There's no difference. Those who say, well, the Paleo-Hebrew is pronounced this way, You know, whenever someone says that, you know they don't know what they're talking about, because nobody knows how Paleo-Hebrew was pronounced. It was Hebrew. It's just a font change. It's like the difference between Arial and Times New Roman, except it's quite a bit different there. And so you do have the ancient Paleo-Hebrew pictographs that are there in the ancient Hebrew that you don't have in the Babylonian Hebrew. But it is those, as a matter of fact, our tour, every year, I take our tour up to Mount Gerizim. And we go into the home and the museum of the son of the high priest of the Samaritans. And Yafet actually reads from the ancient Paleo-Hebrew. All of the Hebrew that the scrolls are all written in, and all the books for the Samaritans still to this day are all ancient Paleo-Hebrew. But he can read modern Hebrew just as fluently because there's no difference. It's all done the same way. And it all has the same pronunciation by the Samaritans today. Whether it's written in modern Hebrew or ancient Hebrew, it's all the same pronunciation because this is the way they pronounce these particular letters. And so now we see that, you know, no matter what it is, whether it's Paleo-Hebrew, whether it is more modern Babylonian Hebrew, it really doesn't matter. It may have been in both, so to make sure that everyone could be communicated well with. And this is what was written. And he wrote in verse 10, in Achashverosh's name, seal it with the king's ring, sent it by letters, by post on horseback, riders on mules and camels and young dromedaries, wherein the king granted the Jews, which were in every city, to gather themselves together and to stand for their life, and to destroy, and to slay, and to cause to perish all the power of the people and province that would assault them, both the little ones and women, and to take the spoil of them for a prey. Upon one day in all the provinces of King Achashverosh, namely, upon the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. And then it says in verse 13, the copy of the writing for a commandment to be given in every province was published unto all people, and that the Jews should be ready against that day to avenge themselves on their enemies. So the posts that rode upon the mules and the camels went out, being hastened and pressed on by the king's commandment. Now, this is the 3rd month, and yet they need to get to the entire empire, because now it has been 3 months that the other order had gone out from the signature of Haman, and now it's getting around to all the kingdom. And people are hearing about this through the entire empire. Now it's 3 months later, and another post has to come out, because now to get to this far ends of the empire, to then allow the Jews to circumvent this order to exterminate them, they have got to get ready. They have got to be able to get the armaments and everything that they need to be able to protect themselves, because now they have an order from the king. They can arm themselves. They have the right to keep and to bear arms now, and to get ready against an assault from the outside and an assault from the inside. Because again, these are people in the empire, in the provinces, that are planning on taking the people out, because they see the advantage of wiping out all the Jews. And so, now that the Jews have the order and they can arm themselves, now they get ready. And so we will continue on. And the decree was given at Shushan, the palace. Verse 15, and Mordecai went out from the presence of the king in royal apparel, of blue and white, and with a great crown of gold, and with a garment of fine linen and purple. And the city of Shushan rejoiced and was glad, because a righteous man is now in charge of the empire directly under King Achashverosh. And so when the righteous rule, the people rejoice. When evil is brought in and you have an evil person sitting in that seat of authority, then the people are greatly distressed and saddened, because a totalitarian government right around the corner, we see that Mordecai is one that does good and looks out for the welfare of his people and not out for the welfare of himself. We'll see that a little later in the text. And then in verse 16, and the Jews had light and gladness and joy and honor. People honored them. And in every province and in every city, wherever the king's commandment and his decree came, the Jews had joy and gladness. And they had a feast. It was a celebration and a good day, Yom Tov. And many of the people of the land became Jews because the respect of the Jews fell upon them. And so we see quite a change in the empire to where those who were not even Jewish said, you know, I want to be one of you. I want your God to be my God. I want your people to be my people. I want to attach myself to Israel. Now, chapter 9, verse 1. Now it is the 12th month. That is the month of Adar. It's the 13th day of the month that the king's commandment and his decree drew near to be put into execution in the day that the Jews hoped to have power over them. Excuse me, the day that the enemies of the Jews hoped to have power over them, though it turned to the contrary, that the Jews had power over those that hated them. Then the Jews gathered themselves together in their cities throughout all the provinces of King Ahasuerus to lay hand on such as sought their hurt. And no man could withstand them, for the fear of them fell upon all people. And all the rulers of the provinces, the lieutenants, the deputies, the officers of the king helped the Jews because the fear of Mordecai fell upon them. Mordecai is second in command. If they don't stand with them, there are now going to be consequences to be paid for those who stand with evil. And so Mordecai was great in the king's house. Mordecai, which means little, insignificant. Now he is great in the king's house. And his fame went out through all the provinces. For this man Mordecai waxed greater and greater. The little man waxed greater and greater and greater. Thus the Jews smote all their enemies with the stroke of the sword, and with slaughter and destruction, and did what they would unto those that hated them. And in Shushan the palace, the Jews slew and destroyed 500 men. And the 10 sons of Haman, and I'm not going to read their names because I do not want to pay them any respect. I do not want their names to be remembered. I want them to be blotted out as Haman's name is blotted out. All of the Amalekites who stand against the people of God, may their name be blotted out. May Hitler's name be blotted out. And so the 10 sons of Haman, who was the son of the doubled, or Ha-Meditha, the enemy of the Jews, they slew. They killed them all. Killed every one of the 10 sons of Haman. But on the spoil, they did not lay their hand. And we also see that this is a repeat of what we see with Abraham, came back from the slaughter of the kings. And the things that his men took, that was one thing. But Abraham said, I'm not going to take a thing. I'm not going to take any goods, any spoils, or anything from you, lest it be said that you've made me rich, because the Almighty is the one that is my provider. He's the one that takes care of me. And this is what the believers, the children of Abraham, can rely on to this very day, that we do not depend upon the world for our sustenance. We depend upon him. He is the one who's put in place his laws, and he's told us how to handle things, what to do with them. We see that at the end of this book that part of the celebration is to, at this point, to give to the poor, take care of those who have less or little, and to minister to the poor, the widows, the orphans. All these things are eternal rules that just never go away in the scripture. But they did not lay their hand on the spoil. They let other people take it, but they did not kill these people for the spoils. They killed them because they needed to be killed. because they were planning on murdering and killing them and taking everything that they had. And so they were the ones that took the stand and said that we are not going to lay our hand on the spoils of this very thing. It was on that day, Adar 13, that the number of those that were slain in Shushan, the palace, 500, was brought before the king. And the king said unto Esther the queen, the Jews have slain and destroyed 500 men in Shushan the palace, and also the 10 sons of Haman. What have they done in the rest of the king's provinces? And so they immediately sent an email out. Right. That's a good question. You know, only those that are very nearby that they could have someone on a horse or a swift dromedary get there, would they even know this? And it says, so what's your petition? And it shall be granted thee. And what is your request further? What shall be done? Because they really didn't have any idea what happened in the rest of the province at this time. Then said Esther, if it please the king, let it be granted to the Jews which are in Shushan to do tomorrow according unto this decree. And let Haman's 10 sons be hanged, impaled upon the gallows. Now we see an impalement that takes place after the bodies after the people are dead. And this is the very thing that we see in the time of Joshua, that they were hanged upon 10 trees, etz, which is the same word for gallows here, etz, which is an impaling stake. They hung the people after they were killed on an impaling stake as the dishonor, because as it is written, cursed is everyone who is hanged upon a impaling stake, a tree, an impaling stake. A stauros in Greek, if you please. And so here it is. It is the ultimate in insult to take a dead body and then to impale them one after another. Now they're 11 deep. They've got Haman on the bottom, who's been impaled vertically from the seated position all the way through, coming out his mouth. And then you got his sons jammed one on top of another, all the way down on this gallows. And the king commanded that it be so done. Okay, go ahead. Impale the rest of his sons and let it be done in Shushan, because we can get the word out throughout the entire city of Shushan. And so they gathered themselves together on the 14th day also of the month of Adar, and they slew 300 at Shushan. But on the prey they did not lay their hand. But the other Jews that were in the king's provinces gathered themselves together. They stood for their lives. They had rest from their enemy and slew their foes 75,000 in one day. But they laid not their hands to the prey. On the 13th day of the month of Adar, and this is what they did on the 13th day. They killed 75,000 in the empire on that one day. Didn't take any of the spoils for killing these people who were gathered together to kill them, and that's an important point. They just didn't go out and start butchering everyone. The ones that came after them, they showed absolutely no mercy. You never show mercy upon the merciless, because if you do, then you are then not being merciful to the righteous. And so on the 14th day, 17th verse, and on the 14th day of the same, they rested. That's all of the rest of the empire. They made it a day of feasting and gladness. But the Jews that were in Shushan assembled together on the 13th day and on the 14th day, and that's when they did their executing. So it was 500 the first day, it was 300 the next day, plus the 10 sons of Haman. And then on the 15th day of the same, they rested. They made it a day of feasting and gladness. Therefore the Jews of the villages that dwelt in unwalled towns made the 14th day of the month of Adar a day of gladness and feasting, and Yom Tov, a good day, and of sending portions of gifts, Thanksgiving gifts, one to another. And Mordecai wrote these things, and he sent letters unto all the Jews that were in all the provinces of the king Ahasuerus, both nigh and far. And so now this word goes out from Mordecai about this. And what is it? To establish this among them, that they should keep the 14th day of the month of Adar and the 15th day of the month of Adar every year. In verse 22, as the days wherein the Jews rested from their enemies, and the month which was turned unto them from sorrow to joy, and from mourning into a good day. And they should make them days of feasting and joy, and of sending portions to one another, and gifts to the poor. And the Jews undertook to do as they had begun, and as Mordecai had written unto them. Because Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the enemy of all the Jews, had devised against the Jews to destroy them, and had cast Pur, that is, that cast the lot, that by pure chance it would be decided upon the day that they would be consumed and destroyed. But when Easter came before the king, he commanded by letters that his wicked device, which he devised against the Jews, now we're going back in time, and because this is, again, this is the writing of Mordecai that is now going out to the entire empire, and saying that when Easter came before the king, he commanded by letters that his wicked device, which he devised against the Jews, that's Haman's device, should return upon his own head, and that he and his son should be hanged on the gallows. So he's letting everyone know that Haman, who is the most revered, the most respected one in the entire empire, when he came against the Jews, this is what happened to him. The king said, execute him, painfully, slowly impale him on this 75-foot gallows. Let everyone in the entire city of Shushan hear the screams for hours. And then after you kill his sons, then impale them. This is what the king determined should be done to these people. Therefore, they called these days Purim, after the name of Pur, which means lots, gambling, casting lots. Therefore, for all the words of this letter, and of that which they had seen concerning this matter, and which had come unto them, the Jews ordained and took upon them and upon their seed and upon all such as joined themselves unto them. See, again, this is those who, they're not by bloodline Israelites even. But yet they said, you know, we want your God to be our God. This is such an incredible testimony. We see that, you know, he is there. He's not silent. He's watching over his people. As Mordecai said to Hadassah, if you refuse to risk your life and go before the king, you make your choice. Because the Almighty's hand is not shortened, he is going to rescue his people no matter what he has to do. But you and your household is going to be destroyed. You're going to die. You're not going to get out of this thing. But the Almighty is going to make sure that his people are saved because he made a covenant with Abraham. All the land from the Euphrates to the Nile belongs to the sons of Israel. And any nation who stands against this will find themselves on the battlefield against the Almighty. He said, you choose. But who knows that you have not been raised up, that you are now the queen of the empire for such a time as this. And that is when Hadassah decided that if she dies, she dies. And this is what she said, if I die, I die. I'm going to do this. But you fast for the next 3 days and 3 nights. In verse 27, so the Jews ordained and took upon them and upon their seed and upon all such as joined themselves unto them. So it should not fail that they should keep these 2 days according to the writing, according to their appointed time every year. And that these days should be remembered and kept throughout every generation, every family, every province of every city. And that these days of Purim should not fail among the Jews, nor the memorial of them perish from their seed. And this is why we celebrate Purim every year. This is why it takes us weeks to get ready. And the teaching of this, so that everyone understands, because the Gentiles are welcome to be grafted into the root of Israel. And if they're not grafted into the root, if they are not supplied by the sap, the nourishment from the root, they will wither, they will die, they will be cut off, and they will be cast aside, and they will be burned. This is what Shaul says, okay? Paul. And we see that the Almighty has worked in this thing, and it is those people who decided we are going to do this, and we're going to do it forever, and we're always going to remember this. Because these are the times, ladies and gentlemen, that we need to remember these things. When evil is seated in the halls of power, when Haman is seated in the halls of power in the United States and getting his authority from those who put him there, and we see that no amount of evil is going to be withheld from those who are now in power in post-Christian America. We are living in this time again, and you have to decide if you are going to stand on the right side, if it will cost you your life, or if you're going to cower and submit and do, as Yeshua said, they, the believers, will hate and betray each other to death, because love will wax cold, because the Torah is gone from their hearts and lives. And all they've got left is some feel-good, sloppy agape churchianity. Well, verse 29, then Esther, the queen, the daughter of Abihail. So I guess we should now call her Hadassah. Everybody knows she's Jewish, okay? So we can forego the Esther, the Babylonian goddess of fertility name. Then Hadassah, the queen, the daughter of Abihail, and Mordecai, the Jew, wrote with all authority to confirm this second letter of Purim. And he sent the letters unto all the Jews to the 127 provinces of the kingdom of Ahasuerus, through all the empire of Xerxes, to confirm these days of Purim in their times appointed, according as Mordecai the Jew and Hadassah the queen had enjoined them. And as they had decreed for themselves and for their seed the matters of the fastings and their cry. Ladies and gentlemen, according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, this is what we do as children of Abraham. Jews, Israelites alike, celebration. And as they had enjoined them, and as they had decreed for themselves and their seed, the matters of the fastings and their cry, and the decree of Hadassah confirmed these matters of Purim, and it was written in the scroll. Chapter 10, verse 1, and the king Ahasuerus laid a tribute upon the land and upon the isles of the seas, because he was in charge, and he laid a taxation upon everyone. Everyone owed him allegiance. And all the acts of his power and his might, and the declaration of the greatness of Mordecai, whereunto the king had advanced him, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Media and Persia? For Mordecai the Jew was next unto King Ahasuerus, and great among the Jews. The little man was great among the Jews, and accepted of the multitude of his brethren, seeking the wealth of his people, their welfare, not getting in everything in for himself. No, he was not like a senator or a congressman in there trying to milk it to death and to get a paycheck for the rest of his life for doing little or nothing for the welfare of the people. No. He sought the wealth of his people, and he spoke peace to all of his seed. Ladies and gentlemen, this is like the beginning of this. Because now what I'd like to do in our last few minutes is to take you into the book of Daniel, into the 11th chapter, into a prophecy that could not be figured out until both Purim and Hanukkah were put in place. And we're going to read in Daniel chapter 11 in verse 31. Armies shall invade on his behalf, and they shall pollute the sanctuary's strength, and shall take away the daily sacrifice, and they shall place the abomination that makes desolate. Now, historically, we know that 168 before the Common Era, that's what BCE, remember? BCE means before the Common Era because it has nothing to do with AD or BC according to a Catholic priest understanding of when Yeshua's birthday was. Even the Pope himself said that that priest was wrong. So it's before the Common Era, 168, Antiochus Epiphanes went in with his troops and placed the abomination that made desolate. They slaughtered a sow, roasted it on the altar, and desolating the altar, placing that abomination at that time. But that's not the only time that it is going to be done in history. In Matthew chapter 24, it is Yeshua that says, therefore the end shall come when you see the abomination of desolation spoken by the prophet Daniel, when he stands in the holy place. Whoso reads, let him understand. See, there is yet another abomination of desolation that is going to be transpiring in the future, of which the one of Antiochus Epiphanes is a prophetic shadow picture. 3 years exactly to the day, which was December 25th, also Kislev 25, in which the abomination of desolation was placed on the altar. The pig was sacrificed on the altar. 3 years later, it just so happens that is a day that they took the Temple Mount. They then destroyed the brass statue of Zeus, who was born on December 25th, who was worshipped by the Greeks, and they broke down the altar and took over the Temple Mount. Later, they built a new altar. They dedicated it for 8 days. That's how long it takes to dedicate an altar, and that is why it's called Hanukkah, or dedication, literally dedicating the altar. That is what Hanukkah means, and that's what it's all about. Now, let's continue on with Daniel, though. Now we're back in verse 32. And such as do wickedly against the covenant. And what is this covenant that it's speaking of? It is the covenant that Abraham and was made between the Almighty and Abraham. All the land from the Euphrates and out belongs to the sons of Israel. You don't give the land away, you don't sell it, you don't lose it in a war. You stand your ground. All that do wickedly against the covenant shall he corrupt by flatteries. But the people that know their God shall be strong and do exploits. The definition of the word exploits is that which would make James Bond cringe under his bed in the fetal position for fear. And they that understand among the people shall instruct many, yet they shall fall by the sword. They're going to be killed. Those that understand are going to be killed. And they're going to fall by flame and by captivity and by spoil many days. Now when they shall fall, they will be helped with little help, but many shall cleave unto them with flatteries. That's why I don't give any ground to those who try to flatter, those who try to bribe, those who try to seduce, saying, oh, I'll give you money if you do it this way. I'll give you a bigger tithe if you do it that way. No, not going to go. Neither the flatteries nor the bribery. I will not be blackmailed. My ministry can't be blackmailed. People can try to steal from me. They can try to kill me, but I'm not backing down. So don't try it. And some of them of understanding shall fall to try them, to purge them, and to make them white even unto the time of the end, because the end is yet for a time appointed. And the king, in verse 36, shall do according to his own will. He'll exalt himself and magnify himself above every god, and shall speak marvelous things against the God of gods, and shall prosper until the indignation be accomplished, for that is which shall be determined shall be done. Neither shall he regard the God of his father, nor the desire of women, neither regard any God, for he shall magnify himself above all. Now this is almost directly, word for word quoted in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come. What day? The day of the Lord Jesus Christ, as it says in the King James, or Yeshua HaMashiach, our Lord, when he comes and gathers us together unto him. That day of our gathering together shall not come, except first there come, hey, apostasia. The rebellious stand, and the man of sin revealed, the son of perdition, who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God, so that he as God sits in the temple of God, proclaiming he is God. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the abomination of desolation spoken by the prophet Daniel for the end times, of which Yeshua then reiterated. Passion dries the throat. Back to Daniel. Thus shall he do to the most strongholds with a strange God, whom he shall acknowledge and increase with glory. And he shall cause them to rule over many, and shall divide the land for gain. And this is what's going on with the United Nations, with the United States, promising $1 billion to resettle the Jews who leave Gaza. But what happens while they are being forced out of their homes in the Gaza Strip after being there for 30 years, a no-name storm starts brewing. It hits the most religious city in America, New Orleans, and the United States never pays the $1 billion. You know where those Jews are today? They are still living in tents. They're still in squalor because the United States lied to Israel. The Almighty does not stand for that. You stand against His promise. And divide the land for your own gain, and He shall plant the tabernacle of His palace, or His command post, between the seas and the glorious holy mountain, yet shall His end come. And then, in chapter 12, we have just a short time. At that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince which stands for the children of thy people. We read right here, we can go right straight to Revelation chapter 12. And there was a war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought in his angels and prevailed not, neither was their place found any more in heaven. And then we go back in Daniel. And there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation, even at that same time. Yeshua quotes the very same thing. For then shall be great tribulation, such as not been from the beginning of time, nor ever shall be, and except those days would be shortened, no flesh should be saved. But for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened. And then back to Daniel, chapter 12. And at that time thy people shall be delivered, every one that shall be found written in the book. Many of them which are asleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, some to everlasting shame and contempt. And they that be wise shall shine as the brightness of the firmament, like the stars forever and ever and ever. That's why I say, people, we are not interested in the extras on the set. We're looking for the stars. Those who are going to shine forever. Not those who want to play religion. Not those who, want to, take a look at the narrow path that leads to life and then decide to go the way of religion. No, they are the extras on the set. Those are the ones that are going to be raised to everlasting contempt. We don't want to be in that category. There are a lot of people that do want to be in that category. Let them go. You can't do anything about those who are destined, who want to go to hell, who want to be raised to everlasting contempt, to be told, get out of my face, I never knew you. You who work anomia, those who are anomia, without Torah. You want to live your own life, you want to do your own thing, this whole life, and then at the end think that you got some kind of reward coming? Forget it. But thou, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book even unto the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge will be increased. And then, here it goes, ladies and gentlemen. I heard the angel, clothed in linen, and he said, it shall be for a time, a times, and a half a time. The very same phraseology that's used in Revelation 12:6, that the woman flees in the wilderness and fed for a time, times, and half a time, 3.5 years. And then it goes on to say that, in verse 9, go your way, Daniel. The words are closed up and sealed to the end of time. And then, In verse 11, but I'll tell you that from the time that the daily sacrifice is taken away, the abomination that makes desolate shall be set up. There shall be 1,290 days. Ladies and gentlemen, from Purim to Sukkot, in a 3.5 year period of time, a little more than that, because 1,260 days, prophetically, is 3.5 years. 1,290 days is from Purim to Sukkot. It's exactly 1,290 days. Blessed is he that waits and comes to the 1,335 days. From Aviv 10, which is the day the Passover lamb is paraded into the city of Jerusalem, the triumphal entry of Messiah, who said, you know, I've not come in my own name, I've come in the Father's name, you haven't received me, there's one coming in his own name. Aviv 10, the anti-Messiah, makes his triumphal entry into Jerusalem. 1,335 days later is Hanukkah, the dedication of the Messiah's millennial temple. But he says, go your way till the end. You're going to rest and stand in your lot. See, we learn from Shaul that the feasts of the Lord are prophetic shadow pictures of good things to come, the mechanism whereby the Almighty tells the end of time from the very beginning. And these numbers that could not be determined beforehand, we see that from Tevet 3, which is right at the end of the 8-day Hanukkah dedication, from Tevet 3 to Purim is exactly 2,300 evening and morning oblations. 1,150 days. From Purim to Sukkot is 1,290 days. From Aviv 10, the abomination of desolation, to Hanukkah is 1,335 days. From Tishri 10, the confirmation of the covenant, to Aviv 10 is 1,260 days, or 42 months, or times and a half a time. And from Aviv 10, the abomination of desolation, to Tishri 10 is, again, which is Tishri 10, which is Yom Kippur, 42 months, 1,260 days, a time, times, and half a time. See, before Hanukkah and Purim were put in place, these things could not be known. Daniel was told, forget it, you're going to be dead and in the grave before any of these come to pass. But yet the Almighty is in charge of the universe. What was done with the random toss of the coin, roll of the dice, or what have you, the Almighty was in charge at the time of Akashverosh. And he is in charge at the time of the Novus Ordo Seclorum, the one world government at the end of time, who has their plans on exterminating all freedom from the face of the earth and turning this world into a prison planet. But the Almighty has a plan. Babylon will be destroyed and the king will reign. I'd like to leave you with this blessing. Yivarechecha Yehovah v'yishmerecha. Yair Yehovah panav elecha v'yichunaka. Yisa Yehovah panav elecha v'yisem lecha shalom. B'Shem Yeshua HaMashiach Sar Shalom. Yehovah bless you and keep you. Yehovah make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. Yehovah lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace in the name of Yeshua, the Prince of Peace. Shabbat Shalom, Shavua Tov. Have a good week, and we'll see you back here next week as we begin our exodus from Egypt.
In his new teaching titled Shipwrecked, Michael Rood reveals the Apostle Paul's experience at sea as a metaphor for